Chapter 581. Ron always held the belief that if I didn't see it, it means it didn't exist. Yet he never questioned his own identity. He didn't ponder why, as a young wizard, Professor Dumbledore would confide in him about confidential matters. Ron appeared somewhat unsettled, but maintained his stance. But, with Snape and Harry's animosity, how can we be certain he'll teach Harry occlumency sincerely? Ethan gently shook his head. You can't question Snape's teaching capabilities just because he harbors a grudge against Harry. Snape is, in fact, an exceptional professor, especially skilled in occlumency. Moreover, Harry's slow progress in occlumency isn't due to Snape's lack of thorough teaching. Why is that? Harry inquired, intrigued. There are two reasons, Ethan elaborated. First, your eagerness to discern Voldemort's actions outweighs your desire to sever that mental link. This distraction hampers your occlumency learning. Harry nodded in agreement, recognizing his own motives. Second, Ethan continued, you simply lack a natural aptitude for occlumency. It's not a fault. Everyone has their strengths and weaknesses. After clarifying, Ethan produced several vials of a highly concentrated potion from his pocket and handed them to Harry. This is the water of life and death, a concoction Snape taught us in our first year, akin to a sleeping potion. While it won't block your connection to Voldemort's mind, it can induce deep sleep, helping alleviate pain. Meanwhile, Harry faces the trials of adolescence, and Fudge, the Minister of Magic in London, grapples with his midlife crisis. Despite his high-ranking position, his troubles persist. Day and night, anxiety gnaws at him like an invisible demon, causing significant hair loss. Fudge believes his re-election would have been secure if not for Voldemort's resurgence, a sentiment echoed by a politician named Chuan Zhengguo, who faced a similar fate due to unforeseen circumstances. Fudge's frustration mounts as he faces the prospect of a second impeachment, fearing it will tarnish his legacy in the wizarding world's history. Under immense pressure, Fudge irrationally declares, I will not leave unless thrown out of the window of the minister's office. Observers note his apparent desperation. With the Ministry of Magic election still years away, Undersecretary Jaina is poised to succeed him. Jaina's stability and reliability in the ministry far surpass those of Zhengguo's deputy, Burns, leading Fudge to speculate whether Jaina's refusal to ally with Dumbledore for the minister's position, opting instead for the deputy minister role, was a strategic move for this very moment. The adage, to destroy a man, first drive him mad, now aptly describes Fudge's plight. The massive prison break on Christmas Eve thrusts him into the spotlight, exacerbating doubts about his leadership amid the chaos. The ensuing impeachment efforts in the Wizengamot, previously limited to Dumbledore's staunch supporters, now attract an increasing number of neutral voices. This growing opposition places Fudge under unprecedented pressure as he confronts the reality of potential removal from office. In the final days of his tenure, Minister Fudge underwent a transformation, casting aside concerns for his image and reputation to sign a flurry of pardons. These pardons were not granted based on merit, but were available to anyone with enough galleons. Fudge rationalized his actions by convincing himself that after years of selfless service to the wizarding community, it was time he fought for his own interests. He believed he deserved more for his contributions, including his receipt of the first-level Merlin badge. Despite the controversy surrounding him, Fudge did not abandon his ambitions entirely. He continued to oppose Dumbledore, convinced that undermining the headmaster would secure his position as minister. In a bold move, Fudge issued dozens of new educational decrees, which swept through Hogwarts like a blizzard, unsettling the entire school. Umbridge, Fudge's loyal assistant, eagerly seized this opportunity to enforce these decrees with a heavy hand, transforming them into draconian school rules. These rules were oppressively strict, stifling the students' freedom and joy with their threatening and intimidating nature. They included absurd regulations, such as requiring students to register with a prefect before using the restroom, imposing time limits on bathroom use linked to final exam scores, and banning unsupervised interactions between male and female students unless approved by the dean. These measures were met with widespread disdain, though some, like Harry, found solace in specific rules that aligned with their personal grievances. Umbridge's reign at Hogwarts was marked by an atmosphere of fear and repression. Her actions placed a significant burden on Harry, exacerbating the stress of an already demanding fifth year. The excessive homework and Umbridge's oppressive policies left Harry feeling overwhelmed, his life consumed by endless tasks and worries. Harry had to endure regular tutoring sessions with Professor Snape, each occlumency lesson feeling like an intense trial that left him anxious and tense. To make matters worse, Umbridge seemed to constantly seek reasons to deduct points, rendering Harry's efforts futile. His heartache deepened when his beloved Firebolt and the Quidditch matches were affected as well. After Christmas, Umbridge formed a new investigative team, primarily consisting of Slytherin students. This team was tasked with enforcing the school's already stringent rules and implementing harsh punishments. The excessive nature of these rules, coupled with the increased penalties, made the situation even more dire. It seemed inevitable that Gryffindor would finish the school year at the bottom of the house points tally. Harry watched the gap in house points widen, feeling a sense of helplessness. The investigative team had recently begun targeting Gryffindor Quidditch players, detaining them and subjecting them to grueling tasks. This strategy was Slytherin's way of undermining the Gryffindor team, aiming to secure a victory in the next Quidditch match by resorting to underhanded tactics. Especially after Gryffindor's loss to Ravenclaw, it became evident that Slytherin's ambitions were not just to challenge Ravenclaw's dominance, but to secure second place in the overall standings. Harry understood that these despicable methods employed by the Slytherin students were designed to ensure Gryffindor's defeat in the upcoming match, revealing their clear intention to manipulate the competition in their favor. Chapter 582, Strengthening the DA. The only thing Harry could do now was to intensify the activities of the DA. In his mind, the secret organization they had formed was not just a defense against malevolent forces like Umbridge, but also a beacon of confidence and hope. Whenever Harry entered the room of requirement, he felt as though he was transported to another world, where the worries of Hogwarts were left at the door. Despite the exhaustion from hours of rigorous practice, the inner joy and satisfaction he felt made it all seem worthwhile. Looking around at the members of the DA, Harry couldn't help but feel a surge of pride as he observed their continuous progress. In one-on-one duel practices, even though some members hadn't fully mastered advanced defensive spells like the Iron Armor Curse, they were becoming proficient in basic attack spells such as the Disarming Curse, Stunning Spell, and Imprisonment Curse. Even Neville, who was once considered a novice, could now use these spells with ease. Harry often fantasized about the moment when all DA members would receive excellent scores in their Defense Against the Dark Arts OWLs. He could almost see Umbridge's shocked and unwilling face, which would undoubtedly serve as the greatest irony and blow to her. In addition to the burdens of academic work and provocations from Slytherin, Harry was troubled by another person, Argus Filch, the caretaker. Filch, with his perpetual scowl, seemed to carry the weight of the world on his shoulders. Lately, Harry had noticed Filch's malicious gaze following him, as if waiting for him to slip up. It's really unfortunate to have such a caretaker, Harry thought to himself. Aware of Filch's loyalty to Umbridge and her efforts to win him over, Harry recognized Filch as a significant threat. His knowledge of the school's secret passages and hiding places was rivaled only by the Weasley twins. Harry had to tread carefully, grateful for the protection offered by his invisibility cloak, without which he would have been far more concerned about being caught by Filch during DA meetings. Meanwhile, in Umbridge's office, she was grappling with similar concerns. She had noticed the frequent disappearances of Hogwarts students, particularly those from Gryffindor, and suspected the existence of an organization opposing her. Despite sending Filch to track them, she had been unsuccessful in discovering their whereabouts or activities, yet they always managed to return before curfew. Umbridge's investigation team, seemingly turning a blind eye to Harry's movements, only deepened her suspicions of a conspiracy involving Dumbledore and Harry Potter. She realized she couldn't rely on the investigation team for this matter. Sitting at her desk, Umbridge pondered Ethan Green's significant influence among the school's top students. The Erudite Society encompasses nearly all the best students, she murmured to herself. Despite Ethan's apparent indifference, his influence was undeniable, and his preferences subtly shaped the society's actions. Umbridge knew that bypassing Ethan and his influence would be impossible if she hoped to catch Harry and the others, presenting a dilemma for Minister Fudge. Rubbing her sore eyebrows, Umbridge felt a growing sense of unease. She began to wonder whether it was time to reconsider her strategy and possibly align with Ethan and Jaina's factions. However, given her deputy status and notorious reputation, she doubted anyone would willingly join her cause. Despite her frustrations with Fudge's tasks, she knew she had to persevere and complete them to the best of her ability. Thus, she decided to shift her strategy. Since direct methods had failed to catch Harry and his friends, she thought it wise to leverage any advantage she could find. Patience, she believed, would eventually reveal a breakthrough. And indeed, an opportunity soon presented itself. One day, Filch was preoccupied with adding new bands to the already crowded wall, muttering complaints about Dumbledore's leniency and fantasizing about the harsh punishments he wished he could inflict on the students. He was oblivious to the Weasley twins' mocking gestures as he spoke of Professor Umbridge's plans to gain more control, including expelling Peeves. After his rounds, Filch returned to his usual spot on the 4th floor, determined to catch the troublemakers. However, he was soon distracted by a box of heart-shaped chocolates left on his seat, a gift from Professor Umbridge, or so the label suggested. Touched by what he perceived as a recognition of his efforts, he eagerly reached for a chocolate, only to experience a sudden, excruciating pain on his face. Dropping the chocolate, he covered his cheeks, feeling something grotesque swelling beneath his skin. In horror, he found a mirror and saw his face covered in yellow, oval-shaped blisters that burst, releasing a foul pus. Distraught and enraged, Filch stormed into Umbridge's office, his appearance shocking and disgusting her. "Someone poisoned me. It must be those little wizards. You have to do something," he exclaimed, his anger causing more blisters to burst, splattering Umbridge with pus. Umbridge, though repulsed and angry, knew she had to maintain composure. Filch was one of the few allies she had at Hogwarts. "Filch, please calm down. Tell me exactly what happened," she said, trying to sound soothing despite her revulsion. She quickly grasped the severity of the situation. After calming Filch's excitement, Umbridge instructed him to seek treatment at the school hospital. Snape entered her office with a cold demeanor, a hint of displeasure in his eyes. Umbridge, however, was indifferent to his mood. She was eager to discuss the matter at hand with Snape. "Professor, see if you can identify the perpetrator. We must find the student responsible for this prank," she exclaimed. Upon hearing this, Snape frowned, deep in thought, before responding. "This seems to be the work of a prank potion. I can attempt to analyze the substance. However, since anyone can make potions, pinpointing the actual culprit through this method might prove challenging." Umbridge's heart sank at his words, her disappointment evident. Yet Snape then shifted the conversation, sparking a glimmer of hope. "Actually, I might be able to deduce the culprit without any analysis," he said, a sneer forming on his lips. "Who else could it be but the Weasley twins?" Umbridge's eyes sparkled with excitement upon hearing this, though Snape failed to notice the subtle joy that flashed across her face. This was the moment she had been waiting for, a perfect opportunity. She quickly purchased a batch of potions from Snape, ostensibly on behalf of the Ministry of Magic. Shortly thereafter, a new announcement appeared on the school's bulletin board, mandating that all students undergo interrogation for suspected illicit activities. Umbridge, relying on the list provided by the investigation team and Filch, summoned the students to her office one by one. Her demeanor was surprisingly warm as she greeted each student, offering them a cup of steaming tea with a smile. Regardless of whether the students were inclined to drink the tea, Umbridge had her methods to ensure compliance. Before long, she found the individual she had been diligently searching for. Chapter 583, The Role of Intelligence in War. What are the important factors that determine the outcome of a war? People often consider a variety of factors, from weapons and equipment to strategic strategies, analyzing each in detail. Yet, in the complex landscape of the battlefield, one factor consistently plays a crucial role at critical moments: intelligence. The significance of intelligence in warfare cannot be overstated, as history is replete with examples where the tide of war was turned due to asymmetric intelligence. For instance, Yamamoto, who orchestrated the attack on Pearl Harbor and initiated the Battle of Midway, was ultimately attacked and killed by the U.S. military after his messages were deciphered. Similarly, the constant intelligence leaks suffered by the National Army left the master of micromanipulation, Chiang Kai-shek, lamenting the universal challenge of securing information. In the magical world, the battle for intelligence is just as intense. The Death Eaters have nearly infiltrated the Ministry of Magic completely, making it porous like a sieve. Within the ranks of the Death Eaters, the White Camp's efforts in espionage seem stretched thin, with Snape being the sole spy capable of penetrating deep behind enemy lines to gather crucial information. Snape, holding a high position among the Death Eaters, earned Voldemort's trust through his exceptional intelligence and deep magical knowledge, enabling him to secure vital information about the Death Eaters at pivotal moments. However, even a spy as skilled as Snape has his limitations, as demonstrated when he failed to disclose the reason behind the repeated attacks on the Department of Mysteries. Ethan's methods of gathering intelligence, however, are far superior. He has managed to place not one, but 2 spies among the Death Eaters, and even positioned an informant close to Fudge. Remarkably, he has also managed to infiltrate Umbridge's circle. The Pangolin, a King's agent, recently relayed critical information to Ethan. Umbridge is plotting an attack against Harry and his friends. Outside the Minister of Magic's office, the corridor buzzed with activity. Officials of various ranks moved about, their robes catching the light as they whispered among themselves, ears straining to catch any sound from the office. In this group, Mrs. Jung, a ministry staff member dressed in a simple robe, spoke anxiously with her superior, Xiao Huang, the director of the Public Information Department. "Director, have you heard any news about the outcome of Secretary Fudge's impeachment?" she asked, her voice laden with concern. Director Huang frowned, scanning the corridor before responding quietly. "There's no definite news yet, but it would be wise to prepare. We may see a new minister by Easter." His words were barely out when another witch, Christian, a staunch supporter of Minister Fudge, expressed her displeasure. "Minister Fudge has the capability to manage the situation. He's quite confident about it. I'm sure he'll overcome this impeachment," she insisted, also mentioning Fudge's repeated accusations against Dumbledore. The director of the Public Information Department offered a slight smile, seemingly unswayed by Christian's argument. He glanced around, noting the eager discussions about the potential new minister, and confidently added, "Everyone close to Secretary Fudge knows that surviving a second impeachment is merely his hopeful wish. He doesn't believe it's achievable. He's only trying to deceive you, the less experienced, ladies." He had initially intended to say old aunt, but upon catching Christian's furious gaze, he tactfully adjusted his wording. Christian's retort, "You want to say old aunt, right? You are the old aunt. Your whole family is an old aunt," echoed through the corridor, eliciting snickers and side glances from those around. Meanwhile, the atmosphere in the minister's office was starkly different, solemn and tense. A circle of senior officials stood around the desk, while Secretary Fudge, deeply sunk into a large chair, presided over the meeting. The pace was slow and tedious, the discussions perfunctory at best. The reports, though comprehensive, were devoid of any substantive progress or decisions, lacking any real substance. Since Secretary Fudge faced his second impeachment, these meetings had become more frequent, sometimes even convened in the middle of the night. This left the officials weary, as they tried their best to accommodate Fudge's requests, all in hopes of weathering this storm. Jodelle and Delis, the minister's close aides, were tasked with reporting on the current situation. They came prepared with a stack of newspapers, marked with red and black arrows, to highlight reports evaluating Fudge's performance. Each arrow stood out starkly against the paper. As Fudge's gaze swept over the newspapers, his expression darkened. He sat, nodding occasionally, but it was clear he wasn't truly listening. His right hand unconsciously gripped his trembling left, attempting to quell the panic within. His eyes, empty and confused, reflected a man whose confidence had been shattered by continuous setbacks. Fudge reminisced about the previous July when Dumbledore lost the presidency of the Federation, a time Fudge thought marked the pinnacle of his career. The newspapers back then were filled with criticisms of Dumbledore and Harry Potter, mocking them with disdain. However, the tide of public opinion had shifted dramatically. Now Dumbledore was hailed as England's guardian, and there were calls for Fudge the Clown to be ousted from his ministerial position. The current headlines, praising the boy who lived for upholding justice in Britain, felt like needles to Fudge's heart, causing him immense pain. As Dellis began to read an article from Wizard Weekly that criticized him, Fudge, with a wave of his hand, interrupted. "It's okay. I've sent Stan to the Wizard Weekly headquarters." His voice was hoarse and weak. "I've ordered them to ban any further coverage of Rita Skeeter's articles. As long as Rita's articles are banned, everything will be fine." Dellis, Yoder, and Percy exchanged uneasy glances, aware that the news they were about to deliver would be devastating for Minister Fudge. Dellis, with a trembling voice, began, "Mr. Minister, there's a situation we need to report to you. It's about Stan. Stan, he—" Yoder, looking pale and sweating profusely, took over, stammering, "Stan just resigned and became the editor-in-chief of Wizarding Weekly. Before he left, he said." Percy, looking unwell but determined, added, "He said, 'Freedom of speech. You have no right to interfere with Wizarding Weekly's reports. The people just want the truth, so you can't keep obsessing over it.'" Fudge's expression hardened, his silence punctuated by bulging veins and labored breathing, signaling his mounting anger. The office fell silent, with all the officials looking down, as if distancing themselves from the unfolding drama. Fudge slowly raised his right hand, signaling the gravity of the situation. With trembling fingers, he removed his reading glasses and placed them gently on the table. Taking a deep breath, he spoke in a hoarse yet strong voice. "Everyone, leave. Dellis, Yodel, and Percy, stay." The officials quickly exited the office, relieved as if they had been granted amnesty. They understood that a critical discussion, humorously referred to as "the three of us," was about to take place, and it was in everyone's best interest to not be a part of it. The last person to leave made sure to lock the door from the outside, ensuring no interruptions. Fudge's gaze was icy as he focused on the three individuals before him. Slamming his right hand on the table, his voice, hoarse yet powerful, filled the room. "Freedom of speech?" he repeated sarcastically. "If freedom of speech exists, why did Wizarding Weekly refuse to publish my interview? Why am I being silenced? They even threatened not to lift my ban until the second impeachment is over. Is this their idea of freedom of speech?" His frustration was palpable as he continued, "This is why I am so upset and angry. This week, 16 newspapers have publicly demanded my resignation. These media outlets, these so-called voices of public opinion, are all against me." When he mentioned Stan, Fudge's anger intensified. "What hurts me the most is Stan's betrayal. He chose to resign when I needed him the most. Subordinates who cannot face challenges are the most intolerable. This despicable coward, he betrayed me and our common cause." Fudge's outrage was indescribable. "The entire Ministry of Magic is deceiving me, even my own office. The employees I hired are nothing but a bunch of despicable, disloyal cowards." Percy, seeing an opportunity as Fudge paused for breath, quickly interjected, "Mr. Minister, please, try to calm down. There are still those among us who are loyal to you. Are you implying you're a loyal minister? You're a coward." Fudge cut him off harshly. "You're a scumbag who's only getting in our way." Percy attempted to defend himself. "Mr. Minister, please hear me out. We have always followed your orders." "Followed my orders?" Fudge sneered. "Is that all you're capable of? You stand here, grown men, yet you act like a bunch of cowards. All you do is talk." "It infuriates me," Fudge roared, his anger reaching a boiling point. He began throwing documents across the room in a fit of rage. "Can't you show some initiative in executing the orders I've given you? When I led you to victory, you all clapped and cheered, swearing that the Dark Lord could not return. But now, he has returned. You knew this, so why didn't you tell me the truth? Are you expecting me to play the fool, accusing Dumbledore and Harry Potter of lying? I should take a leaf out of the Dark Lord's book, learn from Stalin, and rid myself of all you failures." The wizards waiting outside the door listened in fear to the roars emanating from the office. each word echoing the depth of Fudge's fury and despair. Chapter 584, Minister Fudge's Scolding. Minister Fudge's scolding continued unabated for a full 10 minutes before he finally ceased his tirade. His pause wasn't due to exhaustion, but was instead interrupted by Umbridge, his most trusted advisor, who brought unexpected news through the fireplace. "Minister, I'm certain we have evidence that Harry Potter is raising an army." Umbridge's voice emerged from the green flames. "Are you certain you've captured evidence of Harry Potter's army?" Minister Fudge, his eyes widening at the head in the green flames, suppressed his rising excitement and inquired eagerly, "Are you sure? Do you have any conclusive witnesses or physical evidence?" "I'm sure, Minister," Umbridge affirmed with confidence. "We have sufficient evidence to prove that Harry Potter is forming the so-called Dumbledore's army. This is our last chance for a comeback. You must come here as soon as possible." Minister Fudge fell silent for a moment, contemplating the ramifications of acting on potentially false information. However, the thought that this might be his last opportunity to salvage his position spurred him into action. If the evidence turned out to be fabricated, he couldn't fathom the consequences. Yet, the prospect of vindication and the chance to thwart his second impeachment emboldened him. Fudge's eyes gleamed with a ruthless determination, envisioning the dawn of his victory. He was aware that his actions might inadvertently benefit the mysterious adversary, but at this juncture, his priority was to secure his ministerial position. Everything else was merely a stepping stone to his ascent to power. "Percy, Dawlish," Fudge bellowed, "gather a few Aurors immediately and accompany me to Hogwarts. This is our last chance. We must seize it." Wizards from the Special Investigation Operations Group gradually assembled outside Umbridge's office. They had been summoned and arrived one by one to report for duty. However, despite the passage of time, Umbridge's office door remained firmly shut, with no sign of activity. Gabrielle leaned quietly against the cold wall, her gaze lowered, and her long curled eyelashes fluttering slightly as if lost in thought. Pansy stood beside her, no longer treating her with the casual familiarity of before. Pansy's perception of Gabrielle had undergone a dramatic shift since their last meeting in Umbridge's office before Christmas. A few days earlier, Pansy had inadvertently witnessed Gabrielle sitting expressionlessly in front of a makeup mirror, suddenly breaking into a sweet smile. Gabrielle practiced projecting innocence and charm, alternating between sweet smiles and innocent expressions. Pansy couldn't shake the feeling that she had seen such expressions elsewhere. From that moment, Pansy's image of Gabrielle as a naive child crumbled, realizing that Gabrielle was far from the innocent figure she had imagined. Gabrielle had previously complained to the Special Investigations team about the Gryffindor Quidditch players' disdain for her, even inciting them to target the Gryffindors. Reflecting on it, Pansy recognized this as a calculated move to ensure Ethan's team would have an easier victory in their next game. Noticing Pansy's gaze, Gabrielle slowly lifted her head and offered her a sweet smile. However, her expression soon shifted to one of impatience as she tapped the ground with her little leather boots. "Pansy, I'm growing tired of standing," she remarked. Taken aback, Pansy quickly responded, "I'll see what I can do." She approached Umbridge's office door and was about to knock when she suddenly overheard Umbridge conversing with a boy inside. Curiosity piqued, Pansy leaned closer to listen. Straining to discern the sound more clearly, Pansy was taken aback when it ceased abruptly. With a moment's hesitation, she knocked on the door 3 times. After her third knock, a faint light burst from the crack in the door, as if tearing through the space itself. Startled, Pansy stepped back. Then, Umbridge's voice emanated from within the room. "Please wait tea for me for a while." After what felt like an eternity, the heavy wooden door of the office creaked open slowly. Umbridge emerged, dragging a dazed Colin Creevey by one hand and Ewan Abercrombie by the collar with the other, her pace deliberate. The smug expression previously etched on her face had vanished, replaced by a look of concern and worry. "Argus," Umbridge addressed Argus Filch with a serious tone, "please ensure all entrances and exits on the 8th floor of the castle are securely sealed. Not even a fly should get through." After issuing her command, she handed Colin and Ewan over to Crabbe and Goyle, instructing, "Watch them, my boys. Should they attempt to escape, you'll answer to me." Umbridge then turned to Ron, pushing him towards Pansy, his bewildered expression mirroring that of Colin and Ewan, as if he was lost to the world. "Miss Parkinson, please take good care of Mr. Weasley." With that, Umbridge exited the office, her posture upright. Before leaving, she cast a stern glance back at Filch, a silent command to keep watch over everyone. Filch nodded, signaling his understanding. Pansy caught the exchange between Umbridge and Filch, realizing Umbridge intended for Filch to spy on them, the members of the Special Investigation Team. She must know we plan to free Harry, Pansy thought, a sense of inevitability washing over her. It seems Potter is trapped this time, but even if Ethan finds out, he can't fault us. Despite the gravity of the situation, Pansy couldn't help but feel a twinge of satisfaction. After all, she and Malfoy had always been adversaries of Harry and his friends. If not for Ethan, she might have taken pleasure in their misfortune. Meanwhile, at the entrance to the headmaster's office, Umbridge uttered the secret password, "Sizzling Bees." The stone gargoyle leaped aside, revealing a passage that led to the moving stone stairs. Umbridge ascended the stairs, approaching the brightly lit door, adorned with a griffin knocker. The knocker's copper bell-like eyes stared at Umbridge, but she paid it no heed and pushed the door open without knocking. A creaking sound protested her intrusion, but Umbridge ignored it and entered. The office was crowded, the atmosphere thick with tension. Dumbledore sat behind his desk, the epitome of calm, his fingertips lightly touching. Professor McGonagall stood beside him, her posture rigid, her expression laden with concern. Cornelius Fudge, the Minister of Magic, paced by the fireplace, his figure distorted by the flickering flames, clearly pleased with the situation. Rufus Scrimgeour, along with several Aurors, stood guard by the door, their gazes sharp and alert. A television crew was present, their magical camera lens capturing every nuance and expression, ready to record the unfolding events. Percy Weasley paced anxiously, his freckled face tense, glasses glinting, quill and parchment in hand, prepared to transcribe Fudge's words at a moment's notice. "I have sent people to surround the entire 8th floor," Fudge announced, his voice echoing with a mixture of excitement and authority. Umbridge's voice echoed through the office, tinged with an untimely excitement. "Well done, Umbridge." Fudge nodded appreciatively before turning to the old man beside him. "Well, Dumbledore, it appears we've discovered an illegal student organization within this school, named DA, short for Dumbledore's Army. Can you shed some light on this?" Dumbledore wore a look of surprise, his eyes widening as if the name was completely foreign to him. "Dumbledore's Army?" he echoed, shaking his head. "I'm afraid I'm unaware of such an organization. You see, Mr. Minister, during this period, my deputy headmistress, Ms. Dolores, has been overseeing Hogwarts. If such an organization does exist, I deeply regret its formation." Despite Dumbledore's apparent disassociation, Umbridge remained unfazed, confident in the evidence she had gathered. No matter how much Dumbledore denied knowledge of the organization, the evidence would speak for itself. She leaned in to whisper to Fudge, "Minister, perhaps if we proceed directly to the scene, we might uncover more swiftly." Yes, go for it," Fudge agreed, a malicious gleam in his eyes. He gestured for Umbridge to lead the way, casting a sidelong glance at Dumbledore. "There's nothing quite like seeing for oneself, right, Dumbledore?" he said, stressing the phrase as if to insinuate something further. Then, with a slight lift of his chin, he pointed at Fawkes beside Dumbledore. "Also, please bring your bird along." Dumbledore's frown deepened slightly at Fudge's tone, but he chose not to respond verbally. Instead, he gently patted Fawkes's wings, signaling for the phoenix to follow. Rising from his seat, Dumbledore proceeded to follow Umbridge and Fudge out of the office, with the Aurors from the Ministry of Magic trailing closely behind. Chapter 585. At this moment, Umbridge's emotions were fluctuating significantly. She had taken a considerable risk by hastily approaching Fudge with only a handful of confessions. Her primary motive was to prevent Dumbledore from utilizing Fawkes's ability to facilitate Harry Potter and the others' escape. Umbridge was aware that she could only proceed with her plans once Fudge and his team were in the headmaster's office, keeping a close watch on Dumbledore. Having witnessed the Phoenix's capabilities firsthand in her office, she was determined to leave no stone unturned to ensure her plan's success. This resolve led her to reluctantly agree to certain demands from the other party, which she found excessive. With these thoughts racing through her mind, she quickened her pace, leading a group of people to the fourth floor with an air of authority and determination. Meanwhile, in the room of requirement, Harry and his friends were deeply engrossed in practicing the Patronus charm. Suddenly, Seamus Finnegan burst into the room, his voice filled with panic. "We are surrounded. I just saw Filch outside, and the Special Investigations Operations Group is encircling this place. It seems Umbridge is no longer content with having Filch guard this location alone." Seamus's announcement struck everyone like a thunderbolt, halting their practice as they turned to him in shock. A wave of regret swept over Harry. They had noticed the notice earlier in the day, but hadn't given it much thought, confident that no one would betray them to Umbridge. As a brave Gryffindor, he was not inclined to abandon their training session over such a minor issue. "Umbridge must have found out something," Harry said gravely, pondering their next move. Seamus' gaze swept the room, concern evident on his face. "Ron hasn't arrived yet. Could he have been caught?" he wondered aloud. Neville quickly came to Ron's defense, reminding everyone that Ron was often late and this might be just another delay. This reassured the group somewhat, but then Dennis Creevey, looking pale and anxious, raised a concern about his brother Colin's absence, who was usually punctual. This reignited the group's worries. Angelina, visibly frightened, voiced the question on everyone's mind. "What do we do now? If we're discovered, Umbridge's punishment will be severe." Despite her fear, Harry attempted to project calmness, reminding everyone of the Room of Requirement's unique properties that would prevent their discovery. This realization helped to calm the group, though Harry himself remained anxious, his fidgeting wand betraying his inner turmoil. He wished for Hermione or Ethan's presence, knowing they would have a plan. Outside in the corridor, Dumbledore feigned confusion about their purpose there. Umbridge, with a triumphant smile, presented Ron as her witness, claiming he had informed them of an illegal assembly in the Room of Requirement, led by Harry Potter, a meeting of Dumbledore's army. Dumbledore's glance at Ron was met with a flash of surprise, adding tension to the unfolding situation. In a low voice, he expressed his concerns. "Given Mr. Weasley's current condition, I'm afraid his statements cannot be considered reliable evidence. He's clearly not in his right mind, and his testimony was not given willingly. I have serious suspicions that Mr. Weasley was administered Veritaserum without his consent." His tone grew more stern as he continued. "Hogwarts strictly prohibits the use of Veritaserum on students, a policy that is protected and recognized by the laws enacted by the Ministry of Magic." Umbridge appeared slightly panicked, but managed to say, "We only administered 2 drops of Veritaserum to Mr. Ron Weasley. Don't worry, it won't have any adverse effects on him." Her voice trailed off, betraying her lack of confidence. She had felt compelled to act, fearing the consequences of not doing so, but she also believed that if Dumbledore's guilt could be proven or Potter expelled, Fudge would overlook the incident. "Dolores," Fudge interjected, unable to remain still, the inadmissibility of evidence obtained through Veritaserum had always been a cornerstone of his administration. His approach to governance was to be lenient and conciliatory, which had enabled him to outmaneuver Bartik Rauch, known for his hardline stance. Umbridge quickly countered. "Minister, in extraordinary times, extraordinary measures are necessary. As long as the dosage is carefully controlled, asking a few simple questions won't harm the students." Fudge frowned, showing hesitation, but ultimately did not intervene. Seeing Fudge's reluctance as tacit approval, Umbridge gleefully added, "Furthermore, I have other evidence." With that, she vanished into the flames of the fireplace, only to reappear moments later, dragging 2 students whose eyes were as glazed as Ron's. "Dolores, how dare you subject my students to this?" Dumbledore's voice thundered upon seeing Colin Creevey and Ewan Abercrombie, his face contorted in anger for the first time. It was evident that Umbridge had overdosed them with Veritaserum, causing significant physical and psychological damage. Without giving Umbridge a chance to speak, Dumbledore swiftly drew his wand and incapacitated the 2 students. However, his actions were misconstrued as an admission of guilt. "It seems we have conclusive evidence," Fudge exclaimed, his voice tinged with triumph, completely disregarding Umbridge's unethical use of Veritaserum and Dumbledore's growing fury. Dumbledore, ignoring Fudge's jubilation, fixed Umbridge with a stern gaze that made her step back. Umbridge, are you unaware of the irreversible damage excessive Veritaserum can cause to the brain? Although Umbridge's expression faltered, she quickly regained her composure, with Fudge at her side. She deftly changed the subject, pointing down the corridor. Dumbledore, your denial changes nothing. Combined with Mr. Weasley's testimony, it's clear they must be here. Turning to Fudge, she suggested, Minister, we could station guards here in shifts. They'll have to come out eventually, if only to eat. Fudge nodded in agreement, his eyes narrowing as he surveyed the corridor. Indeed, we can station guards here. Dumbledore, you and your fox might face some inconvenience for a few days. While I don't have the authority to arrest you outright, I can authorize Aurors to monitor you and your phoenix to prevent any secret rescues. There's no need for that, Dumbledore responded calmly, his gaze sweeping over the entrance to the room of requirement. He then took out a piece of parchment, gently tapped it with his wand, and handed it to Fawkes beside him. Fudge, mistakenly believing he had cornered Dumbledore, could barely contain his excitement. He leaped up, his voice tinged with triumph, much like a child who had just received candy. Aha! Dumbledore, you've run out of options. You can't even use your phoenix for sending messages. I'm well aware that your phoenix possesses the ability to teleport people. Percy, eager to show his support, quickly chimed in. Indeed, the minister has given this considerable thought and is absolutely correct. However, Dumbledore merely shook his head, a gentle smile playing on his lips as his half-moon glasses slid down his crooked nose. I believe you'll find yourself mistaken on this matter, Cornelius. With a calm demeanor, Dumbledore reached into his robes and pulled out a golden phoenix tail feather from Fawkes. The feather, shimmering brilliantly under the light, was waved gently by Dumbledore. In an instant, the tail feather clutching the letter vanished into flames right before their eyes. Meanwhile, in the room of requirement, Harry was taken aback as a phoenix tail feather materialized in his hand. A moment of stunned silence passed before Dumbledore's voice emanated from the letter attached to the feather, simply stating, "Come out." The young wizards and witches in the room of requirement, having placed their absolute trust in Dumbledore, felt a wave of relief wash over them. Upon hearing Dumbledore's voice urging them to exit, they all let out a collective sigh of relief, and obediently began to file out of the room. It seemed, in that moment, that Dumbledore had once again found a solution to their predicament. Chapter 586, The Confrontation in the Corridor. When Harry and his friends joyfully exited the room of requirement, their brief moment of happiness was shattered by Umbridge's voice echoing in the corridor. "Look, Harry," she exclaimed, pointing at him with a gleeful smile as he emerged first. "And there are the members of that illegal organization." It was only then that Harry and the others noticed Ron, who appeared bewildered, realizing why he hadn't been present at the meeting. They exchanged worried glances, understanding the gravity of the situation. At that moment, Filch handed a list he had found pinned to the wall of the room of requirement to Fudge. Fudge's eyes lit up with excitement as he perused the list, his expression turning to one of triumph when he saw the title. "Oh, this is wonderful," he exclaimed, his voice dripping with satisfaction. "Dumbledore's Army," he read aloud, his tone soft yet filled with implication. Dumbledore, with a calm demeanor, took the parchment from Fudge's hands. He studied the title for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then, meeting Fudge and Umbridge's gaze, he stated calmly, "I organized it." Umbridge, trying to mask her triumph with a sweet smile, softly asked, "So, Headmaster Dumbledore, you admit to recruiting students for your army?" Dumbledore nodded slightly, his voice calm. "I intended to attend their meeting tonight for the first time to see if they were willing to cooperate with me." Clearly, Miss Dolores had her plans well in place. Fudge's reaction was a mix of betrayal and hurt. "You're really plotting against me," he roared, his voice echoing in the corridor. Despite his efforts to undermine Dumbledore, Fudge was torn. He had hoped, deep down, that their old friendship would prevail and that Dumbledore would not truly oppose him. Fudge's desire to maintain his position while denying the return of dark forces had led him to hope against hope that Dumbledore would remain on his side. However, faced with undeniable evidence, Fudge felt his world crumbling. "Is this the end, then?" Dumbledore asked, his voice calm, as if discussing someone else's fate. "Do you require a written confession, Cornelius, or is this statement before witnesses sufficient?" "This was my doing. The students were merely following the instructions of their headmaster." A surge of warmth filled Harry's heart as he understood Dumbledore's intention to protect them from Umbridge's scheme by taking the blame upon himself. Stepping forward, Harry faced Fudge with determination. "Mr. Minister, this was our decision. Headmaster Dumbledore didn't instruct us to do anything. We formed DA and learned defensive magic to protect ourselves and our friends. The responsibility is ours." "Shut up, Harry Potter!" Fudge snapped, his voice harsh. Despite his ruthlessness, it was clear that the confrontation in the corridor was about more than just rules. It was a clash of ideals, with Dumbledore ready to protect his students at any cost. Politician Fudge sighed for a few dozen seconds before recovering and snapped at Harry, his eyes alight with a frightening joy, as if he had finally caught Dumbledore in a trap. Okay, I didn't expect you to actually organize an army," Dumbledore said, waving the list gently, his smile calm. "Dumbledore's army, Cornelius," he corrected. "Not Potter's army, not Weasley's army, but Dumbledore's army. This is organized by me personally and has nothing to do with these students." At this moment, Harry, firmly held back by Professor McGonagall, could only watch the situation unfold. The other DA members began to realize the gravity of the situation, and some started to sob softly. They had thought Dumbledore would protect them, but they hadn't anticipated things would escalate to this point. "Weasley!" Fudge shouted, his voice echoing in the empty corridor. His attitude had completely shifted, and the illusions he harbored were now shattered. He was trembling with joy, believing he had finally found a weapon against Dumbledore. "Wesley, have you got all that? Have you recorded his confession?" "Yes, sir, I believe so, sir," Percy replied earnestly. His nose splattered with ink, but he didn't care. He was busy recording Dumbledore's words, eager not to miss a single word. "He wanted to raise an army against the Ministry of Magic, and he wanted to overthrow me," Fudge continued, his voice swelling with pride. "Has this been recorded?" "Yes, sir, I've noted it all down, yes," Percy replied, his voice filled with satisfaction as he reviewed his notes. "Send a copy to the Daily Prophet immediately," Fudge shouted, excited at the prospect of catching the morning edition. "Let everyone see Dumbledore's true face." He turned to Dumbledore with a sinister smile. "You will now be escorted to the Ministry of Magic," he said viciously, each word seething through his teeth, "where you will be formally charged. Then you will be sent to Azkaban, where endless trials await you." Dumbledore simply smiled softly. "I'm afraid you've encountered a small problem." "Problem?" "I don't see any problems," Fudge sneered, attempting to overpower Dumbledore with his momentum. Dumbledore smiled slightly, gently grasping his elder wand. "Well, you seem to be under the illusion that I will, simply stand by and await my demise. I'm afraid I won't sit idly by, Cornelius." Dumbledore's voice now carried an unquestionable authority. "I have no intention of going to Azkaban. Of course, I could escape, but that would be a waste of time. And frankly, I remembered that I still have a lot of work to do. I'd rather attend to those matters." Fudge stared at Dumbledore, stunned for a moment. A look of horror and disbelief flashed across his face, as if he had been suddenly blinded. Dumbledore was openly defying the Ministry of Magic, an unprecedented act. "You can't escape," Umbridge interjected from the side, her voice shrill and harsh. "A large number of Aurors have arrived at Hogwarts. You can't escape, Dumbledore." At that moment, a large Auror had sneaked up behind Dumbledore. He raised his wand, pointed at Dumbledore's back, and whispered, "Expelliarmus!" However, his spell seemed to hit an invisible wall. That was the iron armor curse cast by Dumbledore without a wand, an indestructible barrier. The Auror looked at his wand in shock, then at Dumbledore, unable to believe what was happening before him. Dumbledore hadn't moved a finger throughout the entire ordeal. "Don't be foolish, Dawlish," Dumbledore turned to the Auror and said kindly, as if trying to reason with a misguided child. "I'm sure you are an excellent Auror. I remember your NUT scores were quite impressive. But if you intend to, arrest me by force, then I will have to respond in kind. He will never fight alone. Professor McGonagall shouted, her voice echoing with determination. Ethan Potter held Harry tightly with one hand, his grip firm to ensure Harry's safety. With his other hand tucked into his robe, he appeared ready to draw his wand at a moment's notice, prepared to back Dumbledore if needed. Dumbledore cast a stern glance at McGonagall, his gaze conveying a clear message of caution. "Minerva, Hogwarts needs you," he stated, his voice carrying the weight of the situation. Professor McGonagall, understanding the gravity of Dumbledore's words, reluctantly abandoned her initial plan. At that moment, another wizard attempted to approach Dumbledore stealthily, his hand reaching into his pocket, presumably for his wand. Dumbledore, however, anticipated the move. With a swift flick of his wand, he cast a petrification curse. The wizard was struck by the spell, his body instantly becoming rigid. He fell to the ground, immobilized and unable to proceed with his intentions. Chapter 587. The sudden battle took everyone by surprise. Minister Fudge appeared panicked, while Percy Weasley seized the moment to demonstrate his loyalty. He positioned himself protectively in front of Fudge, declaring loudly, "Minister, I'm here to protect you." Fudge, visibly relieved, jumped up, patted Percy on the shoulder, and praised, "Weasley, your loyalty is unmatched." Percy, trembling with excitement, drew his wand, seemingly ready to confront Dumbledore. However, Dumbledore anticipated his move. With a swift flick of his wand, Percy was struck by an invisible force. His eyes rolled back as he fell, inadvertently pushing Fudge to the ground with him. Percy's lips made an awkward contact with Fudge's cheek, leaving a wet trail as they slid down to his neck, which disgusted Fudge. "Protect the minister!" Umbridge's shrill voice pierced the chaotic atmosphere. The Aurors, hearing her command, rushed towards Fudge. Umbridge, however, true to her nature, retreated quickly, keen on avoiding the fray. She was convinced that Dumbledore was intent on resisting arrest violently, and she feared being his target, especially since she had orchestrated the events leading to this moment, including the Lupin incident. Prioritizing her safety, she chose to protect herself first. Dumbledore's wand movements were precise. Each flick resulted in an Auror being incapacitated. Meanwhile, the spells cast by the Aurors at Dumbledore were effortlessly blocked by his iron armor protection. The shields clashed with the incoming spells, creating a spectacle reminiscent of fireworks. Fudge, his face a mix of discomfort and embarrassment, wiped away the saliva left by Percy, who lay on the ground, then struggled to his feet, his expression a blend of horror and anger. Magic spells illuminated the room, their impact against the walls producing deafening explosions. Portraits shouted in alarm, Fawkes cried out, and the air was thick with dust and chaos. Scrimgeour, the head of the Ministry's Auror office, and his team were systematically knocked down, their groans of pain filling the room. Umbridge, who had been hiding among the students, was forcibly extracted by Dumbledore. She screamed and flailed, desperately trying to cling to something, but to no avail. She was left spinning helplessly in the air before being unceremoniously dropped at Minister Fudge's feet. Cornelius Oswald Fudge, Dolores Jane Umbridge, Dumbledore's voice resonated through the corridor. "I will leave this school. But should you choose to unjustly punish these students, I will personally return to rectify your mistake." Umbridge, standing aside, was visibly shaken by Dumbledore's display of power. Her face was flushed, her body trembling, a clear sign of her fear and respect for Dumbledore. This encounter was a stark realization for her. Despite her belief in the power and status she held, she now understood how futile her strategies and manipulations were against a truly powerful opponent like Dumbledore. This realization not only deepened her fear, but also her respect for Dumbledore, marking a significant shift in her perception of power. Fear of Dumbledore had not only intensified for her, but also extended to Ethan and Voldemort. Fudge, too, stared at Dumbledore with a mixture of shock and disbelief. He had always considered himself among the most powerful men in the world, yet now, under Dumbledore's gaze, he found himself reduced to nothing more than a whimpering shadow of his former self, devoid of any strength to even move. Dumbledore, however, shifted his focus away from them, turning instead to the young wizards he held in high regard. A warm, steadfast smile graced his face, a testament to how deeply moved he was by their actions. "I won't hide," he declared, waving confidently at Harry and the others. "I assure you, Fudge will soon regret ever attempting to expel me from this school." With that, he beckoned Fawkes, who soared gracefully through the corridor. The phoenix's golden feathers shimmered brilliantly in the light as it descended toward Dumbledore, who grasped its long, golden tail. In a burst of flames, they vanished into thin air. The following morning, Hogwarts Castle was enveloped in a faint mist, an ominous sign of the turmoil that lay ahead. "Everyone, come and see! Something significant happened last night!" a young wizard exclaimed in the common room, drawing a crowd around him. "Last night, the Ministry of Magic uncovered an illegal assembly at Hogwarts. Dumbledore's army," he announced, pointing to the magic TV where Fleur reported in a clear tone. "Albus Percival Wulfric Brian Dumbledore, the former headmaster of Hogwarts, has confessed to organizing this conspiracy aimed at overthrowing the British magical government," she explained. The report went on to describe how Dumbledore, upon being arrested by Fudge's orders, had overpowered all the Aurors, resisting arrest with formidable force. The footage shown on the screen was carefully edited to omit any of Dumbledore's actions that could be seen as benevolent or warning. Instead, it portrayed him as a dangerous rebel, a stark contrast to the respected headmaster he once known to be. "How can this be?" a young wizard exclaimed in disbelief. "How could Principal Dumbledore do such a thing?" another whispered in confusion. The news sent shockwaves throughout Hogwarts, with Dumbledore's escape becoming the talk of the castle. Those who had been part of Dumbledore's army knew the truth, that Dumbledore had taken the fall for them, particularly for Harry Potter, to protect them from expulsion or worse punishments under Umbridge. However, those unaware of the full story were swayed by the manipulated information, beginning to see Dumbledore as a threat and a conspirator, secretly aiming to expand his power. Even wizards who had previously been neutral or supportive of Dumbledore started to question their stance. They didn't necessarily believe he sought rebellion, but the manipulated footage of his confession made them view him as no different from Fudge, Umbridge, or other ministry officials, merely politicians with their own agendas. As Dumbledore's reputation suffered, Jaina remained a passive observer, and the Wizengamot's move to impeach Dumbledore gained momentum. Having lost its core strength, the opposition became as helpless as duckweed, significantly reducing the threat to Fudge and bringing his threat level to almost its lowest point. This turn of events miraculously stabilized Fudge's previously precarious position. Consequently, employees who had once been loyal to him rallied around once more. Director Huang of the Public Information Department, who had previously enjoyed undermining Fudge behind his back, now made a conspicuous effort to demonstrate his loyalty. Meanwhile, Stan, the new editor of Wizard Weekly, made a dramatic gesture by resigning from his position, running to Fudge, bursting into tears, and asking for forgiveness. Fudge found himself back at the peak of his power, the sensation of being adored and celebrated by his peers intoxicating him. Chapter 588. When the evening news arrived, Fleur Delacour's sweet voice once again filled the homes of every wizard with a television. She presented two pieces of news that successfully shifted the audience's focus away from Dumbledore's incident. Fleur, the host, began her segment with a topic that intrigued many. Animagus transformation, as we all know, is a highly advanced form of magic. Mastering it is a challenging feat that often takes years of dedication. Despite all efforts, the outcome is uncertain, with the possibility of failure being quite high. Thus, every wizard who embarks on this journey demonstrates immense courage. To date, the 20th century has seen only 8 registered animagi, with the brilliant Hermione Granger being the most recent to have her name recorded at the Ministry of Magic. She paused, her voice tinged with excitement. However, a piece of astonishing news has swept through the magical world just today. 10 wizards have registered as animagi at the Ministry of Magic. This more than doubles the number of registered animagi in our kingdom. Remarkably, 9 out of these 10 are Aurors, all of whom are subordinates of Deputy Director Tonks and have undergone new Auror training. The 10th is Miss Zhang Qiu, a 17-year-old student in her 6th year at Hogwarts, studying in Ravenclaw House. She is not only the sole student among the newcomers, but also a magical animagus. The audience reacted with a mix of astonishment, speculation, and contemplation. Everyone knows, Fleur continued, that the founder of the new Aurors, Jaina, our Director of Legal Enforcement, and Miss Nymphadora Tonks, Deputy Director of the Auror Office, share a close friendship with the renowned genius wizard Ethan Green. It's also known that Miss Zhang Chu has maintained a good relationship with Ethan during their time at school. This leads us to wonder, has Ethan Green discovered a more efficient and successful method for animagus transformation? Could we be on the brink of an era where becoming an animagus is within everyone's reach? Fleur's face beamed with pride as she spoke of the achievements of the man she admired. As the head of publicity for the Genius Club, she was well aware that these accomplishments were Ethan's doing. After Dumbledore's departure, Ethan began to build momentum for himself, planning to step out from behind the scenes and address the chaos left by Fudge. Dear viewers, as we conclude tonight's news, I have one more exciting announcement for the young wizards at Hogwarts, Fleur said with a slight smile. Hogwarts is set to introduce a new elective subject, Arcane Magic class. The professor of this subject is not only a legend in Hogwarts history, but also the youngest professor to ever teach at the school. He is Mr. Ethan Green, the genius wizard we've been discussing. Fleur's admiration for Ethan was evident as she continued. Despite his youth, Ethan's contributions to magic have surpassed many of his predecessors. His self-developed arcane magic system has not only introduced new perspectives and insights to the magical world, but has also led to the creation of numerous practical and powerful spells. His achievements have earned him widespread respect among both teachers and students. She then shared an important update. It's worth noting that Mr. Ethan Green will continue his studies at Hogwarts as a student until he completes his OWLs and NEWTs. This decision highlights his deep love for magic and his relentless pursuit of knowledge. After learning about Ethan Green's achievements, the directors of Hogwarts proposed to appoint him as the professor of a new course. The new principal, Ms. Dolores Jane Umbridge, also formally approved the request after careful consideration. We look forward to this young professor injecting more vitality into Hogwarts and leading the students further and more steadily on the path of magic. Fleur Delacour revealed exciting news. According to reliable sources, Professor Ethan Green will teach the students some powerful spells in this class. His goal is to improve Hogwarts' original education policy, which resulted in the graduates' lack of magical skills, with some even being unable to cast the Iron Armor curse. I believe that under his guidance, the students of Hogwarts will usher in a new magical era. As Fleur Delacour ended the news broadcast, the British wizarding community was abuzz with discussions, whether it was Dumbledore's resistance to arrest, the appearance of 10 animagi, or the new curriculum. These topics have aroused widespread concern, discussion, and controversy among wizards. In the eyes of wizards, any one of these three things alone can cause an uproar in public opinion. When combined, the effect is even more eye-catching. That night, Austrian and French Unite Television broke too many pieces of news, and public opinion suddenly swept through the wizarding world like a storm, affecting both the bustling Diagon Alley and the pastoral villages. Wizards are debating whether Dumbledore is the light of justice or a vulgar politician. They discuss the secrets of the new animagus method with a high success rate and the magic of animagus transformation. At the same time, they are buzzing about the news of Ethan Green as the new professor at Hogwarts. Hogwarts seems to be starting to follow the example of Durmstrang's School of Witchcraft and Wizardry in adopting a more laissez-faire approach to powerful spells. At this moment, in the Ministry of Magic, Minister Fudge's anger is burning. "This damn TV station," he roared, his face flushed with anger. "They didn't even cut out the scene where I made a fool of myself." He wiped his face angrily, then glared at Umbridge, who was standing in front of the desk. Umbridge stood there timidly, like a frightened little mole, not daring to say a word. Seeing the minister jumping up and pointing at her nose, she got angry. "Also, why didn't you report to me such a big thing as Ethan Green's appointment as a new subject professor in the Ministry of Magic? They actually trained so many animagus subordinates behind their backs. What on earth do they want to do?" Until the evening, Fudge was still immersed in the joy of his good luck, feeling that everything around him was going smoothly and the situation was getting better and better. However, the news from the TV station woke him up from his sweet dream like a bolt from the blue. He realized that even if Dumbledore was driven away by him, the situation had not improved. Instead, he felt a sense of being out of control, shrouded in a sense of depression brought about by a huge conspiracy. A series of sudden attacks by Ethan and Jaina caught him off guard, and more disappearance cases that broke out after Dumbledore disappeared made him even more distressed. What made him most distressed was that the subordinates he had always trusted allowed Ethan and the others to act on their own initiative without his consent. "Please forgive me, Minister." Umbridge's voice was trembling. "I was really forced to agree to his conditions. Otherwise, our operation may fail, become a joke, and we may even be implicated for it." She took a deep breath and tried to calm down her emotions. "You were in the principal's office at the time, and Ethan Green somehow managed to break through Hogwarts' anti-apparition array and appeared. Directly in my office, he threatened me and asked me to agree to his conditions. Otherwise, he would take those students out. He also presented the signatures of various school directors. Those pureblood families couldn't be trusted either." Umbridge's eyes were slightly red, and she seemed to be struggling to contain the grievance and fear in her heart. She stole a glance at Fudge, noticing his ashen face, which made her heart tighten. She quickly added, "But I think Ethan Green didn't do this just because he wanted to take action against us. They proactively put forward conditions, but I felt there was still room for negotiation. If they really wanted to do something, they could have done it quietly while we were preoccupied with Dumbledore." Her voice carried a hint of crying, as if she was defending her helplessness and grievances. However, what she did not reveal to Fudge was that Ethan had also threatened her. He had said coldly, "If you don't agree to my terms, I won't attack Minister Fudge directly, but I will target you personally. I will use Jaina's influence to impeach you, and at the very least, have Secretary Fudge replace you with one of his own." These words hung over Umbridge like a sharp sword, causing her to shudder. Umbridge knew that before a full-scale conflict with Jaina erupted, she might simply be replaced, allowing another subordinate to take over. If Fudge had to choose between these two options, he would choose the latter without hesitation. She understood the minister all too well. He always prioritized the overall situation, and, to maintain his power and status, he was willing to sacrifice anyone. After hearing Umbridge's account, Fudge's expression softened slightly. He pondered for a moment and then said, "This is indeed like their style. They are like a pack of greedy hyenas, always trying to gain some advantage in every field. It seems their frequent attacks in the political and business circles are not enough. Now they aim to extend their influence into Hogwarts." Chapter 589. The atmosphere in the Defense Against the Dark Arts classroom was tense and heavy. Harry, Ron, and the other members of Dumbledore's army sat in their respective seats, each gripping a slender black quill with a sharp tip. Umbridge, seated in a luxurious chair on the podium, held a delicate pink teacup, sipping black tea with an air of elegance. Her gaze swept over the students, who were suppressing their pain and anger, yet dared not speak out. A sense of joy filled her heart, momentarily pushing aside the fear that an angry Dumbledore instilled in her. Despite this, Dumbledore's threat kept her cautious, limiting her to only torturing the students in this manner, making them endure the pain of their skin splitting and healing repeatedly. Harry's hands were a testament to this cruelty, bruised and healing over and over. The numbness in his hands was nothing compared to the pain in his heart. He regretted naming the group Dumbledore's Army and the trouble it had caused. Dumbledore's departure weighed heavily on him, filling him with guilt. He would have preferred to take all the punishment himself rather than have the headmaster suffer on their behalf. Ron, sitting next to Harry, appeared dazed, still under the lingering effects of Veritaserum. He silently vowed never to accept anything from Umbridge again, convinced that his clear mind would never betray his friends. This thought helped him combat the guilt that gnawed at him, remembering how he, Colin, and Ewan had inadvertently leaked secrets. Despite Dumbledore's reassurance that it was a result of the Veritaserum, Ron struggled to shake off his guilt. Behind them, the Weasley twins, George and Fred, glared at Umbridge, their eyes communicating their mutual disdain for the new headmistress. In their years at Hogwarts, they had never despised anyone as much as Umbridge, making even Filch seem endearing by comparison. After class, they paused in front of the school's bulletin board, where a new notice announced Umbridge's appointment as headmaster and the introduction of a new elective, arcane magic, taught by the talented Mr. Ethan Green, in accordance with Education Order No. 28, signed by Cornelius Oswald Fudge, Minister for Magic. The notice felt like a heavy weight on their hearts. Harry expressed his anger to Ron about the media's portrayal of Dumbledore, criticizing the TV stations for their malicious editing and the Daily Prophet for depicting Dumbledore as a dangerous dark wizard. Ron agreed, both feeling a deep respect for Dumbledore and dissatisfaction with how he was represented. Ron recalled the day he was under the influence of Veritaserum, the memory still vivid. Although I was in a daze that day, I did hear a man talking to Umbridge. I could have sworn on Merlin's beard. Ron stared at Ethan's name on the notice and said firmly, "That's the light of space spells." Harry frowned slightly after listening to Ron's words. He had always been dissatisfied with Ethan's attitude towards the Order of the Phoenix and Dumbledore this year. However, hearing Ron's hint, he couldn't help but defend Ethan. "That doesn't mean it was Ethan who did it," Harry retorted. "After all, Floo powder can also allow people to come in and out of the fireplace. We cannot jump to conclusions just because we see some signs." "Harry, wake up!" Ron's voice was sharp, and his finger almost poked Harry's nose. "That's the light of space spells, just like when Dumbledore used Fawkes to leave. God knows how Ethan invented such magic. It may not be impossible with his ability. But now, as soon as Dumbledore was driven away, Ethan came back and took his men who had learned animagus to register with the Ministry of Magic. Eventually, he even became a professor of arcane magic. If there is no connection between this, I will sleep with the acromantula in my arms." For the first time, Harry discovered that Ron could actually make such a well-founded analysis. He was a little speechless when he argued, but still insisted on his point of view. "However, we can't be sure that it's just based on these." "Harry, think about it," Ron continued, his voice full of anxiety and anger. "We set up DA. What was the original intention? Isn't it because Umbridge just follows the instructions in class, doesn't let us learn practical magic, and doesn't allow us to set up an organization like the Erudite Society? All this proves that the Ministry of Magic does not want us to improve our capabilities." Having said this, he spat at Umbridge again to show his disgust. After being forced to drink Veritaserum, this became Ron's habit, and then continued. "But what about now?" As soon as Dumbledore left, they immediately changed their attitude, and it was widely announced on television that Ethan's elective course would teach spells of arcane magic and powerful magic, and even some dangerous magic. They were talking about fighting, not dueling. Why don't you understand? They had long been sure that Voldemort was back, but they still choose to fight for power first. These damn bureaucrats, these damn pure-blood families. Ron may seem a little dull in his studies, but he showed surprising sharpness when he speculated on Ethan's threat theory. His remarks were almost misshapen and touched on the truth hidden behind. Hearing this, Harry couldn't help but nod in agreement. He couldn't deny that Ron's point of view was indeed reasonable. Thinking of Ethan's kindness and selfless help to him, Harry felt a surge of mixed emotions in his heart. However, when he thought again of Ethan's ambiguous attitude towards the return of Voldemort, he felt betrayed. This feeling weighed heavily on him, as if he had lost something precious. Not only Harry and Ron had these thoughts. Even Professor McGonagall, a faculty member who strongly supported Dumbledore, had doubts about this situation. She also pondered Ethan Green's role in this crisis. The benefits obtained seemed second only to Fudge's. She couldn't help but wonder, although Ethan had been colluding with Jaina and Katrana of the Ministry of Magic for a long time, when did Katrana Prestor, who originally only held a small share of the shares, gain such influence over Hogwarts? Now the school directors have such a significant say? Moreover, Umbridge, who has always been arrogant, so easily agreed to a student's unreasonable request to become a professor? There must be some unknown reason behind this abnormal situation. The agreement and Dumbledore's departure were probably the result of their joint planning. However, what confused Professor McGonagall was why Dumbledore sent a message telling her not to try to stop this. After all, teaching students such powerful and potentially dangerous magic was a significant matter. In addition to Harry and Ron, many students at Hogwarts harbored concerns about the forthcoming arcane magic class. This apprehension was particularly prevalent among students from mixed or Muggle families, with Hufflepuff House students showing notable unease. From their first day at Hogwarts, they had been regaled with countless tales of dark wizards and the perils of dark magic, making them acutely aware and sensitive to such dangers. Their anxiety was further fueled by supporters of Dumbledore, who, upon learning that the arcane magic class would delve into powerful and potentially hazardous magic, immediately associated it with the nefarious aspects of dark magic. This connection stirred fears among the students, leaving them apprehensive about the introduction of such a course. They worried it might inadvertently lead them down a path toward the dark arts. As the new year approaches, I find myself quite busy, but I will strive to keep you updated. Chapter 590. Monday marked the official inauguration of Ethan Green. That night in the Hogwarts Great Hall, the young wizards of the Erudite Society, organized by Hermione Granger, were already eager to participate. However, the evening banquet was not solely to celebrate Ethan's appointment. Its true significance lay in Umbridge's success in ousting Dumbledore and officially assuming the role of Hogwarts' headmistress. I am pleased to announce, Umbridge's voice resonated throughout the Great Hall, the introduction of a brand new course at Hogwarts, Arcane Magic. This course will be taught by Professor Ethan Green. He will instruct students on how to utilize spells for combat and master some of the most powerful magic. I am confident that under his guidance, our students will achieve even greater success. As Ethan made his way to the teacher's desk, Hermione's eyes sparkled with determination. Clutching her wand tightly, she raised it above her head and whispered the spell, Dancing Lights. Instantly, a bright orb of light burst from the tip of her wand, soaring like a meteor towards the enchanted night sky depicted on the auditorium's ceiling. The orb exploded in the sky, transforming into a dazzling star. Its brilliant white light shone down on the Hogwarts auditorium, cutting through the surrounding darkness as if illuminated by a morning star. Inspired by Hermione's actions, Ginny, Ravenclaw's Zhang Chu, Luna, and others stood up. They mimicked Hermione, raising their wands and chanting in unison, Dancing Lights! Dancing Lights! Consequently, orbs of red, yellow, and blue light shot from the tips of their wands, turning into colorful stars that adorned the sky above the auditorium. Following their lead, the senior officials of the Erudite Society stood and cast the Dancing Light spell. More and more society members joined in, and the auditorium echoed with the incantations of the Dancing Light spell. Points of light in various colors danced and intertwined in the air, merging into a dazzling sea of artificial stars. This spectacle left the teachers and students in attendance in awe. They gazed up at the sea of stars created by the young wizards, their faces alight with surprise and admiration. Although Dancing Lights is merely an entry-level spell in the arcane magic system, capable of condensing a point of light that can dance lightly, its simplicity, combined with the coordinated effort of the young wizards of the Erudite Society, resulted in a breathtaking display of beauty. Other young wizards paused to marvel at the starry sky above. After a moment's hesitation, many who were not members of the Erudite Society, including Ravenclaw students, numerous Hogwarts girls, and even Ethan's loyal fans, couldn't resist joining in. Raising their wands to the sky, they chanted, Dancing Lights! Dancing Lights! With each crisp spell, more points of light streaked across the sky like meteors, blending into the dazzling sea of stars. Gradually, the sea of stars coalesced into an even more spectacular Milky Way. Reflected on the auditorium's ceiling, which appeared dim due to the cloudy skies outside, it resembled a genuine starry night sky. The starlight seemed to pierce through the thick clouds, illuminating the previously gloomy atmosphere. Under the conscious or subconscious control of the young wizards, these lights converged into beams, shining upon Ethan, making him appear as majestic and sacred as a deity commanding the stars. This scene, witnessed by all staff, including Umbridge and other wizards present, left everyone in shock. Umbridge herself and the young wizards who had previously witnessed the Patronus charm farewell were particularly astounded. To Professor Lupin, the emotions were palpable. Compared to the complex Guardian charm, dancing lights is much simpler, serving only to illuminate. Yet, the impact of the scene before him was even more profound. Those with insight quickly grasped the significance behind this. Although dancing lights appears straightforward, it was the fear-wrist arcane magic created by Ethan. Should the history of arcane magic be recounted, this spell will hold a crucial place. It has also become the most widespread among arcane magics, with its influence so deep that even students from Beauxbatons and Durmstrang have learned it. At this moment, the starry sky created by dancing lights symbolizes Ethan's impact and the reach of his arcane magic at Hogwarts. Each light in the starry sky represents an individual touched by his arcane magic. Their brilliance and beauty perfectly encapsulate Ethan's contributions. This magnificent display not only showcased the strong public support for his arcane magic class, but also served as compelling evidence of the course's validity. Following such a demonstration, Ethan's ability to conduct arcane magic classes was no longer just sanctioned by the Ministry of Magic and the school board, but was also backed by the widespread support of Hogwarts' young wizards. In a corner, unnoticed by others, Luna used her secret eye to capture everything happening in the auditorium. As the laughter at the banquet subsided, Ethan gave Hermione a big hug, his voice laden with appreciation. "Hermione, your inauguration ceremony was truly unique, and I am deeply impressed." He hadn't anticipated the girl possessing such a skill. This not only made him feel the support of his classmates, but also showcased a significant wave of influence, which was indeed very meaningful. Hermione was about to bask in Ethan's praise when Umbridge's shout interrupted. "Professor Ethan Green, could you please come over? I have urgent matters to discuss with you." Umbridge had planned to adopt a superior attitude and summon the newly appointed arcane magic professor Ethan Green, expecting him to defer to her as the new principal. After all, she was the principal, and he was merely a faculty member, his professorship granted by the Ministry of Magic. She had been secretly pleased, thinking, "Now you're finally in my grasp." However, witnessing Ethan's prestige within the erudite society and across Hogwarts, her pride vanished. The Milky Way formed by dancing lights at the banquet reflected Ethan's status among the students. She realized that the so-called Ministry of Magic's support was merely nominal. Ethan could easily disregard this title and become an arcane magic professor with far greater actual influence. She found herself powerless to stop him. Reflecting on Ethan's substantial connections within the Ministry of Magic and recalling the lesson Dumbledore had taught her, Umbridge recognized how insignificant her power was against true authority. Consequently, Umbridge changed her approach and opted for flattery. The arrogance brought on by her sudden rise to power dissipated. Her fuchsia suit made her stand out in the crowd as she reached over other students, opened her arms wide, and warmly embraced Ethan, pretending to showcase their closeness. She whispered to Ethan, "I'm sorry, Mr. Green. I failed to follow your advice earlier. Please forgive my previous ignorance and arrogance." Ethan frowned slightly at Umbridge's sudden warmth and instinctively took a step back. Ethan casually pushed Steve next to him, trying to escape the overpowering scent of Umbridge's perfume, which was too strong and sweet, almost suffocating. He asked in a deep voice, "What happened? Have the items been untouched? I'm going to retrieve them." Umbridge, slightly out of breath from Ethan's imposing presence, replied with a cringe, "Mr. Green, I swear, I don't know what's in the headmaster's office. Nothing has been moved." She paused, her voice tinged with helplessness. "In fact, I can't even enter the headmaster's office. The stone guardian protecting it is too powerful, and I can't breach its defenses. The office seems to have sealed itself automatically." "Then let's go take a look," Ethan said, waving his hand gently to show he understood the situation. He turned to Hermione, quickly explained a few things, and then, in front of everyone, transformed into a ray of fire and vanished. This, was the apparition ability granted to him by the Phoenix, allowing him to instantly move to any desired location. Now, some secrets no longer needed to be deliberately concealed. Umbridge watched Ethan disappear, excitement evident on her face. She made a flattering noise, akin to a pug, and then bowed deeply towards the spot where Ethan had vanished. With short steps, she hurried towards the headmaster's office. Ethan's feet landed softly and silently on the solid ground as he arrived in the headmaster's room. However, as soon as he entered, he was greeted by an indifferent voice. "Hey, Ethan Green, what are you doing here?" The speaker seemed surprised by Ethan's sudden appearance. Ethan didn't give Fang a chance to continue. He waved his wand, and his psychic powers surged through the headmaster's office like a tumultuous wave, affecting every portrait in the room. The portraits of past headmasters and headmistresses seemed to lose their vitality, falling into a deep slumber within their frames. Their expressions were frozen in time. Some appeared majestic, others kind, but all were motionless. Some portraits fell to the floor, the sound of shattering glass filling the air. Others slumped in armchairs, seemingly drained of all strength. A few leaned awkwardly against their frames. The entire office was enveloped in a deathly silence, as if all life had been sapped from it in an instant. Chapter 591. After dealing with the portraits, Ethan's gaze settled on the exquisite silverware positioned on tables with slender legs. Despite the surrounding chaos, they seemed untouched, quietly emitting smoke and rotating slowly. Ethan surveyed the room, filled with history and mystery, without making any hasty moves. He approached the door, opening the heavy door adorned with monstrous copper rings, and ascended the spiral staircase, unveiling the stone monster guarding the entrance. Umbridge, with eyes gleaming with greed, stepped onto the staircase. The moment she entered the headmaster's office, she made a beeline for the desk. However, Ethan, with a flick of his wand, unleashed a psychic force that immobilized Umbridge. She screamed in terror, finding herself unable to move as an invisible force held her firmly, lifting her aside with ease. At that moment, Professor McGonagall burst in, her excitement turning to shock upon seeing Umbridge, once haughty, now standing beside Ethan like a subdued servant. "They are indeed in cahoots. Dumbledore was ousted from the school because of their conspiracy," she exclaimed, disappointment and anger evident in her eyes. "Professor McGonagall, I believe you're not permitted in the headmaster's office without my consent," Umbridge retorted with a sinister smile, attempting to compose herself despite the effects of Ethan's spell. "I, as the current head of Hogwarts, declare Dumbledore a fugitive," she added, casting a fearful glance at Ethan. "Moreover, you should address Mr. Ethan Green as Professor, as he is now your colleague." McGonagall's expression hardened, her grip on her wand tightening before she reluctantly relaxed. Umbridge's smile widened, reveling in her perceived control. McGonagall's thoughts drifted to the artificial Milky Way still suspended above the auditorium, a sign of weakness in her eyes. She looked at Ethan, reminiscing about his younger days in her Transfiguration class, feeling a mix of heartache and self-blame. Despite not being his head of house, she had always considered Ethan her student, pondering why talented young wizards often strayed from the right path. Outside the headmaster's office, Ron nudged Harry, a gleam of vindication in his eyes. "See, I knew Ethan Green was up to no good," he whispered. Harry, however, looked at Ethan with a sense of sadness. He had harbored hopes that Ethan, despite his silence on Voldemort's return, had his reasons. Yet the scene unfolding before him shattered those illusions, revealing a deeper collusion with Umbridge that left Harry feeling betrayed. A crowd of onlookers had gathered outside, their attention fixed on the office door. Inside, Ethan Green was focused on dismantling the spells protecting the headmaster's office. These spells, once cast by the revered Dumbledore, were designed to safeguard the school and its treasures. However, Ethan's actions suggested a different agenda, one that seemed to undermine the very foundations Dumbledore sought to protect. At this moment, the powerful protective spells that guarded the principal's office seemed almost fragile against the genius of Ravenclaw. Ethan's wand traced elegant arcs through the air, each movement precise and powerful, as though he were conducting a silent symphony. With every flick and swirl, the spells were systematically dismantled, and the principal's personal effects were carefully set aside. Books flew from their shelves as if summoned by a mysterious force, spinning through the air before stacking neatly in an open space. Ethan then sheathed his wand, a satisfied smile playing on his lips. Turning to face the eager eyes at the door, he extended his hand in an elegant please gesture towards Umbridge. "Now, this place is yours." Umbridge's face twisted into a grotesque expression of delight, reminiscent of a toad eyeing a succulent fly. She hurriedly waddled over and practically threw herself into the principal's chair. Settling in, she let out a long sigh, closing her eyes to savor the sensation of power the grand chair afforded. Witnessing this, Professor McGonagall's complexion turned ashen, her anger nearly overwhelming her. Thankfully, Pomona Sprout, the head of Hufflepuff, was there to offer support and comfort, preventing McGonagall from succumbing to her fury as she had before. The two professors exchanged looks, their eyes reflecting a mix of helplessness and rage. They realized the situation was beyond repair and prepared to leave the office, now usurped by Umbridge. As they turned to leave, a single tear escaped McGonagall's eye. She mourned the loss of the principal's office, once a beacon of wisdom and warmth, now a casualty of a power struggle. And Dumbledore, the man she deeply respected and cherished, where was he in this dark hour? Please wait a moment, Professor McGonagall. Where are you going?" Ethan's voice, tinged with surprise, halted her in her tracks. McGonagall, momentarily stunned, straightened up and faced Ethan with a newfound resolve. She addressed him with a tone of respect, as though speaking to a peer, yet her words were laced with irony. However, Ethan seemed to ignore the sarcasm, responding earnestly, "Professor McGonagall, you and Dumbledore shared a close bond. Wouldn't you want to safeguard his personal belongings?" A mischievous smile appeared on Ethan's lips as he winked at McGonagall and Sprout, hinting at a successful prank. McGonagall, initially overwhelmed with grief and indignation, was taken aback. Her glasses slid down her nose as she stared at Ethan in disbelief, her anger dissipating. "What? You mean to say you want me to keep Albus's belongings? You didn't intend." Before she could finish, Umbridge, who had been reveling in her newfound authority, leapt from the chair, her voice sharp with alarm. "Wait a minute, Professor Green. What are you doing?" She reached out as if to seize Ethan, but hesitated, her hand hanging awkwardly in midair. Ethan looked around, confusion and a hint of frustration evident in his expression, his tone full of misunderstanding. "Grievances. What are you pondering?" Umbridge stamped her feet anxiously, her cheeks flushed with emotion as she spoke eagerly. "Dumbledore has been dismissed as the headmaster of Hogwarts. The items he left behind, protected by magic, are essentially an illegal occupation of the headmaster's office. I'm merely here to rectify this situation. But what else can I do?" In any organization, once an employee is terminated, they no longer have the right to access their personal belongings, do they? She was about to issue her command in her usual bureaucratic tone, but realized the need for a more tactful approach. "Wait a minute, Mr. Ethan Green, our Ministry of Magic needs to sift through these items to find evidence of Dumbledore's actions and whereabouts. You can't. Please, don't hand them over to McGonagall." "Our Ministry of Magic?" Ethan maintained a calm demeanor, giving Umbridge a light glance. "Dolores, I don't recall ever mentioning. I've never heard of Sister Jaina." He paused as if realizing he had revealed too much, then slowly corrected himself. "I mean, the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, led by Lady Jaina Proudmoore, hasn't issued any warrants to seize Dumbledore's belongings and property. It's illegal to confiscate a wizard's property without a warrant. I don't have permission, but I'm going to obtain it right now. Secretary Fudge can issue the necessary permits." Umbridge's voice trembled, clearly flustered. After Ethan mentioned the Department of Magical Law Enforcement and Jaina, she clung to the hope that Fudge could sway Ethan's decision. "Of course you can, Dolores." Ethan's smile faded as he slowly walked towards Umbridge with his hands behind his back. Under Ethan's imposing presence, the new headmaster of Hogwarts unconsciously stepped back until her back hit the cold wall. Chapter 5592. Seeing Umbridge's ridiculous performance, Ethan stopped and said with a joking smile, "In fact, you could ask Minister Fudge for permission." However, he shifted his tone to a more serious one. You don't have the authority to prevent Professor McGonagall from taking Dumbledore's personal belongings until you've obtained that permission, do you? Perhaps you might want to challenge Professor McGonagall to see who is quicker? Ethan shook his head and clicked his tongue. Oh, naive Dolores, do you really intend to tamper with the personal belongings of the world's most powerful wizard? He looked genuinely sorry for Umbridge's folly. I saw on TV how Dumbledore cornered you in the news. I thought you would have learned your lesson by then. There was a hint of pity in his eyes, which made Umbridge instantly realize the folly of her actions, blinded again by the illusion of victory. She remembered the fear and helplessness she felt when Dumbledore had threatened her life. Thinking about her recent foolish behavior, she broke out in a cold sweat. Her face turned extremely pale, resembling a frightened woman beyond her years, her trembling hands clutching the armrests of the headmaster's chair tightly. Her chest heaved violently with fear, as if it might burst through her clothes. She slumped in the chair, seemingly drained of all strength. Opening her mouth, she found herself unable to utter a single word. Professor McGonagall. Ethan turned around with satisfaction and addressed Professor Minerva McGonagall. I believe you heard everything, right? I suggest you act swiftly to avoid any complications. Professor McGonagall snapped out of her daze. Without taking the time to thank Ethan, she hurried towards Dumbledore's memory bottles, which contained his precious memories. To Professor McGonagall, these were invaluable and needed to be secured without delay. At that moment, Hermione made her way through the crowd of onlookers with 2 suitcases, expanded by the invisible telescopic charm, and handed them to Professor McGonagall. Professor, please use these. Mr. Ethan asked me to bring them, Hermione announced, deliberately loud enough for Harry, Ron, and the others in the crowd to hear. She had been enduring their malicious gossip, and now she seized the opportunity for a bit of revenge. She raised her chin proudly, making them feel the shame they had inflicted on her in their first year. Ron's face turned red, his freckles less noticeable, while Harry lowered his head, unable to meet Hermione's gaze. However, George and Fred exchanged looks, smiled, and high-fived, celebrating the turn of events. Despite the doubts many young wizards harbored about Dumbledore due to the reports, they couldn't bring themselves to accept someone like Umbridge as headmaster. Seeing Umbridge's deflated demeanor brought smiles to their faces. After a brief moment, the atmosphere, which had been slightly harmonious as everyone united in their disdain for Umbridge, tensed once again. Professor McGonagall, there seems to be a misunderstanding, Ethan said in a deep voice. Of course, you can take Dumbledore's personal belongings, but the books here are property of Hogwarts and must remain. I'll sort them out myself and return them to the school library. He paused, glancing at the curious and eager faces outside the door, a playful smile on his lips. I'll share some of this knowledge in my class. If you meet my requirements and attend regularly, you'll find I'm more reasonable than Professor Lockhart. Especially when it comes to issuing permission slips for restricted areas, I'm quite generous. Professor McGonagall's expression changed abruptly upon hearing this. She was eager to interject. But, Mr. Ethan... Ethan stopped packing the books and turned to face the Professor of Transfiguration. Professor McGonagall, why does Dumbledore believe he has the authority to override the decisions of previous headmasters? His tone grew serious. These books represent the culmination of knowledge gathered by countless predecessors since Hogwarts was founded. They should be used to enlighten students' minds, not locked away in this small room. In the principal's office, knowledge is neutral. Its value depends on how it's used. As he spoke, his voice grew louder, ensuring that students outside the door could hear him clearly. The reason I applied to be the professor of arcane magic is to address the significant educational oversights made by Principal Dumbledore during his long tenure and the negative impact these have had on Hogwarts. Ethan's voice resonated in the corridor, each word landing with the weight of a bombshell, shocking the teachers and students who heard him. They had been pondering Dumbledore's legacy, but the idea of openly questioning the educational approach of the long-standing headmaster of one of the world's premier wizarding schools was unthinkable. Mr. Green, please retract your statement. Professor Sprout's expression suddenly shifted. The usually cheerful Hufflepuff headmaster now appeared both angry and agitated. Ethan raised his hand to stop her. "Professor Sprout, please hear me out," he said, his voice calm yet firm. "Since Dumbledore began his tenure, what has been the standard of spellcasting among British wizarding community graduates? The reality is that many cannot even cast the most basic iron armor curse. Is this not an educational failure? Meanwhile, Durmstrang School graduates excel in various spells. How can we, as Hogwarts graduates, not feel embarrassed?" Ethan's critique was filled with dissatisfaction and concern for Hogwarts' current state. He intentionally omitted mentioning Hogwarts' strengths in areas like potions, herbalism, and charms, focusing instead on its shortcomings to underscore Dumbledore's educational failures. "Hogwarts was once the best wizarding school in the world, an undisputed fact," Ethan continued. "But can we still claim that title today? Are we merely coasting on the residual prestige of the past and Dumbledore's personal reputation? This is a question we must seriously consider." Although Professor McGonagall acknowledged the significant decline in Wizards' combat abilities in recent years, she did not believe Dumbledore was solely to blame. Indeed, the level of combat among wizards has alarmingly decreased. However, it's unfair to place all the blame on Dumbledore. The Dark Lord cursed our most crucial practical course, Defense Against the Dark Arts, making it difficult for any professor to last more than a year. Albus has made considerable efforts to find capable Defense Against the Dark Arts teachers annually. Ethan couldn't help but sneer at this. Considerable efforts? Are we talking about Quirrell, Lockhart, or someone as distinguished as Crouch Jr.? His tone dripped with sarcasm. If Dumbledore truly wished to address this issue, he has the full capacity to do so, as the principal. But often, people are. Confused by his aura as the greatest white wizard, they ignored such simple problems and their solutions. Umbridge sat in the principal's chair, listening intently to the conversation between the two. She had long heard rumors about the curse and had always considered her experiences this semester as its result. At that moment, she believed she had found an opportunity. Eager to stand up and support Ethan's words, she planned to delve deeper into the curse, using it as an excuse to hold Dumbledore accountable. However, the moment she attempted to rise, Ethan's sharp gaze, as piercing as ice, immediately forced her back into the principal's seat. Ethan's intimidating look caused Umbridge to lose her courage instantly, compelling her to sit back down obediently. "Ethan, breaking the curse is much more difficult than casting it," Professor Phileas Flitwick interjected, making his way through the students who towered over him. His arrival slightly eased the tense atmosphere. Despite his doubts about some of Ethan's actions, Professor Flitwick immediately sought to defuse the situation. He did not want this talented young man to become alienated from Hogwarts due to impulsiveness. Moreover, Umbridge's mix of truth and lies had already infuriated his colleague, Minerva McGonagall, to the point of fainting from anger, and Flitwick had no desire to see her further agitated. Even Headmaster Dumbledore might struggle to break this curse, cast by the mysterious man himself, he said, glancing at Ethan and then at the other professors and students present. "However, you are also a master of curses. If we can collaborate, and with Headmaster Albus's help, it might be possible to find a way to break this curse." Chapter 593. Ethan could discern the underlying message in Professor Flitwick's words. He was attempting to mitigate the tension between Ethan and Dumbledore. For Ethan, Professor Flitwick had always been a figure of immense respect at Hogwarts. The head of Ravenclaw House was not only a fount of knowledge, but also embodied courage. Reflecting on the past, both he and Professor McGonagall were considered difficult students to sort, causing the sorting hat to waver between Gryffindor and Ravenclaw. Professor McGonagall endured 5.5 minutes of the sorting hat's indecision before being placed in Gryffindor House. Professor Flitwick faced a similar dilemma, with the sorting hat contemplating whether to send him to Gryffindor or Ravenclaw, ultimately choosing Ravenclaw. Had the sorting hat decided differently, their roles as deans might have been reversed. Meanwhile, Umbridge, overhearing their conversation about the Defense Against the Dark Arts class and its associated curse, had her expression contort in disgust, reminiscent of a toad that had swallowed a poisoned fly. A strong urge surged within her to return to the Ministry of Magic and request Fudge to appoint a new professor for the course. However, she realized that until a suitable replacement was found, she had no choice but to endure. Thus, she suppressed her panic and resolved to dedicate herself to her duties as the head of Hogwarts. "Forgive me, Professor Flitwick. I believe that everything I have done is in the service of restoring Hogwarts to its rightful path and reviving the wizarding world," she stated. Ethan observed Professor Flitwick's disheveled appearance with a silent sigh, appreciating the numerous occasions the professor had embarrassed himself for Ethan's sake. In this moment, Ethan abandoned his usual demeanor and, with a touch of pride, stepped forward to tidy Professor Flitwick's clothes and magically comb his hair. "We don't actually need to lift the curse placed on the Defense Against the Dark Arts by you-know-who," Ethan explained earnestly. As Professor Flitwick mentioned, breaking the curse is far more challenging than casting it. But curses, like contracts, require precision. Since the curse specifically targets the Defense Against the Dark Arts class, we can circumvent it by creating a new course. He paused before continuing. In fact, both Professor Flitwick's Charms class and the Dueling Club wine established in my second-year cover content that overlaps with the Defense Against the Dark Arts. Yet instructors of these classes remain unaffected by the curse. By integrating the core content of the Defense Against the Dark Arts into other courses, we can cleverly avoid the curse. Upon hearing Ethan's proposal, everyone was visibly surprised, having never considered that Voldemort's curse could be circumvented in such a manner. "Yes, it's that simple," Ethan said with a slight smile. However, Dumbledore, as the headmaster, chose not to pursue this route. Instead, for reasons unknown, he seems to have been leading you all to believe deeply in the myth that the Defense Against the Dark Arts class is cursed, thereby preventing you from exploring other possibilities. Hearing this, Professor McGonagall was jolted awake from her reverie. As a professor at Hogwarts, she was genuinely pleased that Ethan could tackle such a challenging problem at Hogwarts. However, her mood shifted upon hearing Ethan criticize Dumbledore. As a member of the Order of the Phoenix and Dumbledore's close friend, she felt compelled to defend him. "Ethan, perhaps you've simply misunderstood Albus," Professor McGonagall suggested calmly. "You are a true Ravenclaw, capable of thinking creatively. Yet, it's unrealistic to expect everyone to share this trait. Maybe Albus, like many of us, found himself trapped in a cycle he couldn't escape." Professor McGonagall hoped her words would resonate with Ethan, but his reaction was not what she expected. Instead of agreement, Ethan's expression conveyed skepticism. He didn't accept her justification, nor did he believe Dumbledore was merely caught in a cycle as she proposed. Lifting his head, Ethan shared his perspective. "Professor McGonagall, to be frank, during my third year, I had some dealings with Headmaster Dumbledore. He allowed me access to several books, offering me a peek into the secrets of the Hogwarts Library's restricted section. The content wasn't as perilous as I had anticipated. While it did include some dark magic, the danger wasn't as severe as one might think. There were also unique potion recipes and rare spells." He paused before continuing. "Yet, the books that could truly enhance a wizard's knowledge and elevate their abilities were kept hidden in the headmaster's office by Dumbledore himself. It seemed he was indifferent to this knowledge, or at least that's the impression his actions gave. In my view, he concealed this information because he didn't want others to access it." Professor McGonagall frowned, clearly unmoved by Ethan's argument. She responded firmly, "Ethan, you might not grasp Albus's true intentions. He hid this knowledge to protect the students. Much of it is too complex and hazardous. Early exposure could disrupt their studies and potentially endanger them. You're friends with Miss Luna Lovegood. You must know about her mother, Pandora Lovegood, a former Hogwarts student. Her obsession with dangerous knowledge led to a tragic accident while experimenting with a soul spell, resulting in her death. Albus aims to prevent such tragedies." "Ethan, using the tragedy of a student's mother as an example seems somewhat inappropriate," Ethan replied, his smile fading. He raised his hand to silence McGonagall's attempt at an apology and Professor Flitwick's effort to ease the tension. "Let's be frank," Ethan continued. Have you considered the true purpose behind establishing restricted sections in Hogwarts and similar institutions? It's meant to protect and nurture students. It keeps those who lack the necessary skills and discipline from accessing knowledge beyond their grasp, preventing harm. Meanwhile, it offers a pathway for exceptionally talented students to delve into deeper knowledge, ensuring they don't plateau due to a lack of resources. He paused, his voice tinged with passion. However, in my view, Dumbledore's actions stem from a personal desire for control. He aims to prevent the rise of another Voldemort, but he also doesn't want any powerful individuals he can't oversee. Unable to contain his thoughts, Ethan expressed his skepticism towards the achievements of notable students like Bill and Percy Weasley. Despite their exceptional academic records, with each securing 12 certificates, predominantly graded O for outstanding, their career paths seemed mundane to Ethan. Bill became a curse-breaker for Gringotts, and Percy secured a position within the Ministry of Magic. Although Percy's role could be deemed significant, Ethan viewed him as just another ordinary individual in the grand scheme of things. Ethan couldn't help but sneer as he voiced a bold suspicion. He speculated that Dumbledore, the revered headmaster, might have had an ulterior motive in his dealings with such talented students. Ethan suggested that Dumbledore might have intentionally suppressed these bright young wizards to prevent any of them from rising to a level where they could potentially challenge his authority. This theory extended to those who, unlike the dark wizard Voldemort, had no intentions of turning to evil. With a sudden burst of energy, Ethan approached Professor McGonagall, his eyes ablaze with intensity. He locked gazes with her, his expression one of earnest inquiry. Considering everything, Professor McGonagall, do you still believe that Headmaster Dumbledore's actions align with the noble intentions you've always attributed to him? Ethan questioned, challenging the conventional perceptions of Dumbledore's character and motives. Chapter 594. Professor McGonagall was momentarily taken aback by Ethan's sudden approach and his pointed questions. Her voice betrayed a hint of panic. No, that's not the case, Ethan. Albus hasn't completely forbidden students from accessing the restricted section. With a professor's signature, they can still borrow books containing relevant knowledge. Moreover, Albus deeply cares about the personal growth of his students and loves them dearly, not in the way you might think. However, Ethan remained unswayed, shaking his head firmly. Professor McGonagall, I've mentioned before that merely lifting restrictions on reading materials in the restricted area won't significantly enhance the students' combat abilities. While there's nothing inherently wrong with a school principal focusing on students' character and promoting love, neglecting their academic and practical development is, in my view, a grave oversight. It renders Principal Dumbledore more suited to a role akin to a campus psychologist in the Muggle world, rather than that of a principal. By preventing students from learning more advanced magic, is he trying to avoid accidents? Professor McGonagall, can you tell me why his beloved students can't even cast the Iron Armor curse after graduation? How many Hogwarts graduates have been involved in the recent spate of disappearances because they lack combat skills? How did they defend themselves against dark wizards? Before Ethan could finish, he advanced another 10 steps towards Professor McGonagall, who, feeling overwhelmed, instinctively stepped back and nearly stumbled. Fortunately, Professor Flitwick, with his quick reflexes, was there to steady her from behind. Yet McGonagall seemed lost for words, unable to counter Ethan's argument. The truth was, many of the victims in those disappearance cases were her former students. Ethan's words plunged her into self-reflection, regretting that she hadn't fulfilled her duty as a professor in preparing students to defend themselves. Seeing that Professor McGonagall had fallen silent, Ethan turned his attention to the students gathered outside the door. Using the phantom sound charm, he spoke loudly. I believe that magic and spells are not inherently good or bad. It all depends on the intent and how they are used. Ordinary magic can be misused, just as fire can be used to start fires. However, even dangerous or dark magic, if used for a noble purpose, is acceptable. He continued, of course, we can't ignore that some dark magic may affect our temperament, but that shouldn't deter us from learning it. humans are complex beings, capable of both good and evil emotions. Seizing the moment, Ethan began to promote his course. In my classes, I'll teach you how to use these magics correctly, helping you maintain an inner balance while mastering powerful spells. I won't make you saints, nor will I turn you into devils. Although this elective won't immediately be recognized by the Ministry of Magic in the OBULs or NET exams, nor will it grant you an extra certificate, it will significantly increase your chances of survival against adversaries. After a brief pause, Ethan looked around at everyone present, then addressed a topic of widespread interest. I'm aware of the recent speculation within the British wizarding community regarding the return of you-know-who. I am eager to verify the truth of this news. However, for myself, Jaina, and Alpha United, we won't be easily shaken by it. Over the years, we've prepared ourselves for any situation. Even if the mysterious man truly returns, Ethan said, waving his wand gently. The magic was so potent it felt tangible, gathering around Ethan and forming a 7-colored orb of light that floated beside him. We possess the confidence and strength to defeat him. As Ethan finished speaking, applause surged like a wave. The young wizards of the erudite society, accustomed to applauding after his speeches, did so now, albeit with some reluctance. Traditionally, the powerful arcane magic was exclusive to their society, a marque of their unique status. Yet, Ethan's plan to share this knowledge with all Hogwarts students seemed to them like an infringement on their privileges, as if someone else had laid hands on their cheese. In addition to the students in the intensive training class, other young wizards at Hogwarts also clapped enthusiastically. Some of the more extroverted students even whistled, with cheers and shouts following in quick succession. Ethan's words had deeply resonated with them. Even the mischievous twins, George and Fred, found themselves cheering for Ethan's declaration. They chose not to dwell on their annoying brother Percy, focusing instead on their brother Bill. If Bill could access these resources, his talents would be better utilized. Despite being from a pure-blood family, the Weasleys were not wealthy, and the family's resources for magical study were limited. The twins exchanged looks, each understanding the other's thoughts. Dumbledore isn't as bad as Ethan thinks, George remarked, but in this matter, he might indeed be less proactive than us. Fred nodded in agreement. As fans of Dumbledore, this was a significant admission, and if they felt this way, it was likely that other students, less informed about Dumbledore, would share their sentiment. Recent portrayals of Dumbledore in the media had already tarnished his reputation among the students. Ethan's critique today, painting Dumbledore as ambitious, hypocritical, narrow-minded, and selfish, only worsened this image. Yet, at the same time, the students were excited about the arcane magic and powerful spells Ethan promised to teach. They were thrilled at the prospect of having new ways to enhance their abilities, different from what their parents and siblings had. They looked forward to the future with longing and hope, eager for more choices and their own paths. The initial resistance to the introduction of new subjects, especially from mixed blood and Muggle-born wizards, as well as students from Hufflepuff House, diminished significantly after hearing Ethan's heartfelt speech. The mention of the forbidden book area particularly sparked interest among them. Ethan's actions seemed to not only elevate their knowledge, but also bridge the gap between them and pure-blood families. In the wizarding world, the prejudices of pure-blood supremacy and Muggle discrimination are deeply ingrained. This is partly due to the conservative mindset of many wizards, but also because pure-blood families are indeed more likely to produce exceptionally talented young wizards, with magic that seems to flow through their bloodlines. The long-standing heritage of pure-blood families has allowed them to accumulate a wealth of knowledge and unique magical skills, akin to the nobles and old money in the Muggle world. Over generations, these families have maintained extensive collections of books and magical items, with the Black family's collection being a prime example of this tradition. However, Ethan's arrival marked a significant shift, breathing new life into this stagnant atmosphere. His actions have opened up a treasure trove of knowledge and magic, far surpassing that of most pure-blood families, to half-blood and Muggle-born wizards. While there are barriers to accessing this knowledge, Ethan undoubtedly offers them a shortcut to success, especially in the realm of arcane magic. For the first time, half-blood and muggle-born wizards are seeing arcane magic as a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, thanks to Ethan's creation of this new magic system. It has dismantled the barriers between purebloods and muggles, leveling the playing field for all. However, as with any change, there are those who stand in opposition. Despite the faith many have in Ethan, there are skeptics and strong adversaries. Among Ethan's critics are those who witnessed Dumbledore's attempt to resist arrest on the 8th floor in an effort to protect them. Led by Harry and Ron, these individuals harbor deep resentment towards Ethan, particularly upset by his disparaging remarks about Dumbledore. They struggle to reconcile Ethan's portrayal of the principal, who had always been a protective and guiding light, with their own experiences. Yet, surrounded by Ethan's supporters, these dissenters find themselves unable to voice their opposition openly. Instead, they can only glare at Ethan with anger, their eyes seemingly attempting to pierce through him. Chapter 595. Umbridge, seated in the principal's chair, was experiencing a whirlwind of emotions. She had anticipated a routine meeting but was unprepared for the tumultuous ride Ethan's presence would bring. Initially, his decision elevated her to the heights of power she had long coveted, only to plunge her into despair by denying her access to Dumbledore's personal effects. Yet, Ethan's analysis soon reignited her excitement, offering a new strategy to undermine Dumbledore. Umbridge had initially sought Dumbledore's belongings to gather evidence against him. However, Ethan's insights presented an alternative, publicizing his remarks, selectively omitting his final comment that hinted at Voldemort's return could restore her favor with Fudge. This revelation clarified the potential for collaboration between Umbridge, the Fudge faction, and Ethan, centered on their mutual opposition to Dumbledore. Umbridge's gaze inadvertently fell on Professor McGonagall, whose eyes were brimming with tears. She mused on the parallels between their situations, though McGonagall, as a staunch Dumbledore ally, faced a more profound dilemma. Unlike Umbridge, McGonagall's loyalty to Dumbledore deepened her predicament, highlighting the complexity of their positions within Hogwarts. Ethan emerged as the clear beneficiary of the situation. His adept handling of the dialogue and actions not only salvaged his reputation among the students, but also showcased a more sophisticated approach than Fudge's overt attempts to discredit Dumbledore. Ethan's strategy, focusing on undermining Dumbledore's legacy under the guise of righteousness, revealed his prowess in both strength and strategy, leaving Umbridge both impressed and slightly intimidated. As McGonagall departed with Dumbledore's belongings, Umbridge, now more cautious, seized the moment to align with Ethan. She tentatively suggested publishing his remarks in the Daily Prophet, to which Ethan, without turning from his task of organizing books, calmly consented. His assurance dispelled her concerns about confronting the wizarding world's most formidable white wizard, marking a significant shift in their dynamic. Umbridge's newfound eagerness, coupled with her worry for Ethan's safety, underscored the depth of her transformation. Ethan's confident response, devoid of fear, highlighted a pivotal change in his stance towards the wizarding world's power dynamics. Umbridge, recognizing the significance of Ethan's confidence, could not help but marvel at the young man's strategic acumen and resolve. The words coming from Ethan's mouth were indescribably convincing, as if they were undeniable truths. She couldn't help but continue to ask, "Then why did you help Mag and let her take those things away?" Ethan finished packing the last book into his suitcase and stood up. "Just because I'm not afraid of them doesn't mean I want to bully them at will. Just because I'm against Dumbledore doesn't mean I think he's not a good person. It's just the most basic respect for a good person." He paused, then continued. "Besides, I don't need to cross the line and completely anger them. Dumbledore is different from Voldemort. As a white wizard, he needs to be reasonable. And I always choose to first refute him logically and then take action." After that, he opened the door to the principal's office and walked away. Outside the principal's room, a crowd was still gathered. Ron glared at Ethan's departing figure with anger, his eyes seeming to burst into flames. "How disgusting! He's playing with people's minds, Harry. He enjoys the feeling of being able to control others at will and the process of making other people's emotions change according to his wishes. Ron clenched his fists, his voice full of determination and anger. I swear, he smiles sinisterly every time people's emotions change. It must be said that Ron was quite imaginative in his malicious speculation about Ethan. This time, he was close to the truth. Ethan, who had mastered psychic powers, did indeed take the approach Ron described, but not of any evil intention to play with people's hearts. Well, there was indeed some mischief, but more so because inciting emotions in this way was the most effective method for him to fully convey his point of view directly to everyone's hearts. Listening to Ron's words, Harry nodded with a look of disappointment. However, unlike Ron, Ethan's previous statement had stirred something within him. He recalled participating in the DA, where many senior wizards felt helpless due to their clumsy performance in casting the disarming curse. He was also well aware of the frequent replacement of Defense Against the Dark Arts teachers and the uneven teaching quality, which was undoubtedly a major flaw at Hogwarts. Before entering the 5th grade this summer, Dumbledore had indeed restricted correspondence with him. In short, Ethan's accusations against Dumbledore were not without foundation. Harry then shook his head firmly, trying to clear the doubts from his mind. He knew very well that Dumbledore had even lost his position as principal to take the blame for him. How could he be a bad person? Since Dumbledore was a good person, Ethan's stance was puzzling. In Harry's mind, Dumbledore was the greatest white wizard, and his resistance to black magic was perfectly normal. Moreover, Dumbledore was always so kind to his students, his eyes always so warm, making people feel endlessly cared for, and his heroic performance at critical moments made Harry unable to accept Ethan's accusations against Dumbledore. He felt that Ethan was indeed a quick-thinking and thoughtful person, but not everyone could be expected to analyze every problem as meticulously as someone from Ravenclaw. At that moment, Ron was still grumbling. Look at those short-sighted people. Ethan actually wants to promote dark magic in Hogwarts, and they're so happy about it. Do they really want to openly become like the Dark Lord to gain the faith of others? Think about the mysterious man, Crouch Jr., and those guys who study black magic. Who are they? Listening to Ron's words, Harry couldn't help but think of his past experience wandering into Nocturne Alley, those dirty, weird, spooky storefronts, the creepy old witch, and the powerful potion that Ethan mentioned all left him with lingering fears. Also, he read through that book and obtained the formula for the compound potion from it. However, the painful expressions and howling sounds of the characters in the illustrations made them unforgettable. Ethan actually felt that such books were not enough. Thinking of this, Harry couldn't help but nod, looking at Draco Malfoy and the indifferent Slytherin students standing behind him. Some of them, if they really learned black magic, would definitely use it for nefarious purposes. Once those ambitious conspirators mastered this power, the consequences would be catastrophic. With this in mind, Harry's conviction strengthened. Dumbledore was right, and Ethan's plan could not be allowed to succeed. He must stand up and defend the purity and justice of Hogwarts. In fact, Ron and Harry didn't realize that Ethan was fully aware of their thoughts. Just like in the principal's office, Ethan relied on his psychic powers to understand other people's emotions and manipulate them at will. Now, he easily detected the illusions harbored by these young wizards who had not yet mastered occlumency. Ethan smiled slightly, an idea forming in his mind. He suggested, "It seems that everyone has some doubts about who is right and who is wrong regarding the teaching methods of Principal Dumbledore and myself. How about this? Let's have a competition and prove whose method is more effective. Anyone who wants to can compete with the wizards of the Learned Society. This will be a fair duel, and the facts will prove whether Dumbledore really failed in his duty to improve your strength." As soon as Ethan finished speaking, someone questioned, "But if arcane magic is really that powerful, then there's no need for us to compete. The wizards of the Erudite Society have already learned a lot of arcane magic. How could we possibly win over them?" This question immediately attracted a chorus of echoes. "No need to worry. When we spar, we will only use the spells we can learn at Hogwarts," Ethan responded calmly. not taking the doubts seriously at all. In this way, everyone can compete fairly. The game is scheduled for this Saturday at the Quidditch pitch. Students who are willing to come and challenge can try. Think of it as the first practical lesson I give you. As soon as Ethan's words fell, a lively discussion broke out among the crowd. Ron and Harry looked at each other, both seeing serious looks in each other's eyes. They realized that this discussion was not only about personal matters, but more about the honor and future of Hogwarts. Chapter 596. On a bright Saturday morning, the sun bathed the Quidditch field in a golden light. The air was imbued with the freshness of grass and the coolness emanating from the distant lake, as if nature itself was gearing up for the impending showdown. The stadium's auditorium buzzed with people, their presence akin to turbulent waves, one after another, seemingly gathering all the wizards in the school. Their enthusiasm and expectations merged into an invisible force, infusing the stadium with an undeniable vitality. Among the crowd, the faces of young wizards brimmed with excitement, while curiosity sparkled in the eyes of others. They pointed and chatted animatedly. Since the conversation in the principal's office, news had spread throughout the school like wildfire, leaving no one in the dark. Secret eyes were activated in every corner of the stands, keenly observing everything on the field. The TV station staff moved briskly among the crowd, their presence lending a touch of formality and grandeur to the event. Alpha United TV's host and chief reporter, Fleur, made her way to Ethan, her smile as radiant as the spring sun. She embraced Ethan warmly. "You are the first professor in the history of Hogwarts to appear on TV," she exclaimed. Ethan shook his head with a gentle smile. "No, Fleur, you're mistaken," he corrected, under her puzzled gaze. Principal Dumbledore was the first. Cyrilla approached, her short gray hair fluttering in the breeze. "Then you are the first professor in history to bring his class to television," she declared, confidently bestowing Ethan with a historic title. This competition was more than just a duel for Ethan. It was a testament to his role as a professor. It marked the debut of the first class in Hogwarts history to be broadcasted. The girls had come to witness this significant moment. As the competition commenced, Ethan shed his usual student uniform for a formal suit, walking elegantly to the center of the Quidditch pitch. A dueling platform, identical to the one used in the third game of the Triwizard Tournament, stood at the heart of the field. Holding his wand, he waved it gently. Though his voice was soft, the phantom sound technique ensured it reached every ear. "My students, my colleagues, and those who have come from far and wide, welcome." Ethan's warm greeting was met with thunderous cheers and applause from the audience, punctuated by the excited screams of the girls from the Genius Club. They were there not only to support Ethan, but had also brought along colleagues from the Ministry of Magic and Alpha United Company. Their collective voices drowned out any skepticism regarding dark magic and Ethan's qualifications. Ethan smiled, continuing, "Although this is not a traditional course, what you are about to witness is a preview of the first arcane magic class in Hogwarts history." Realizing he had inadvertently used the word historically, Ethan chuckled, a moment that was captured and magnified by the live projection, eliciting screams and cheers from the stands. The witches jumped excitedly, as if witnessing a rare treasure. Cyrilla, standing in the stands with her arms crossed, muttered to Penello, "Tsk, these women are screaming as if someone's chicken coop has been opened." As Ethan's girlfriend, she was accustomed to the frenzied cheers from female fans, yet her gaze remained fixed on Ethan. "As you've read in the Daily Prophet recently, our wizarding community in the UK has long been hindered by outdated educational methods," Ethan began, addressing the crowd and setting the stage for a historic demonstration. As the most prestigious magical school in the world, Hogwarts bears the responsibility to spearhead change. To ensure our students can master the magical skills necessary for their protection on campus, I am introducing a new course to share my original magical techniques. Given that this course is being introduced midway through the semester, it will not be included in this year's exam system. Moreover, I won't be imparting knowledge in a formal or systematic manner until the next semester begins. However, Ethan paced slowly across the duel stage as he spoke, his voice resonating throughout the area. His deliberate steps seemed to measure the course of history itself. The Quidditch field fell silent, with only Ethan's voice piercing the quiet. The young wizards listened intently, pondering the issues Ethan raised. Recently, the castle buzzed with debates comparing Ethan to Dumbledore. Opinions among the young wizards varied. Some admired, while others objected. Yet, Ethan's speech undoubtedly stirred their hearts, prompting them to consider the type of education they truly desired. Even those who had been aimlessly chasing credits began to reassess their futures. Arcane magic, Ethan's voice rang out, pointing his wand towards the members of the erudite society in the stands, is a realm accessible only to those with a profound desire for knowledge and power. His words were met with enthusiastic applause and cheers from the stands. Members of the erudite society and the young wizards enrolled in the arcane magic class clapped fervently, their faces alight with pride and anticipation. Ethan's speech made them feel chosen and superior to their peers. Standing on the duel stage, Ethan spread his arms wide, as if to embrace the crowd's enthusiasm and expectations. "It's time," he declared, "for us to lead a wizarding renaissance, to rejuvenate our creative minds, and to reject the stagnant, standardized safety spells that have lulled us into complacency. We must not allow outdated ideas to suppress our innovative spirit." As Ethan spoke, he raised his wand skyward. Suddenly, the clear blue sky was torn asunder by lightning and thunder, with bolts striking down in a spectacular display. The thunderous sound resonated deeply with everyone, and the brilliant flashes of lightning were too intense to gaze upon directly. When the audience's vision cleared, they were surprised to find several young wizards standing on the duel stage. Half were from Ravenclaw House, and the rest represented the other 3 houses. They stood with pride and confidence. "These individuals," Ethan began, gesturing towards them, "are distinguished members of the erudite society I founded. Steve Cohen Ford, Padma Patil, Draco Malfoy, Ernie Macmillan." As he announced each name, their faces beamed with the confidence and pride of the elite. "For the sake of fairness," Ethan continued, his gaze sweeping across the audience, "the first duel I have arranged will follow the traditional one-on-one format of our British wizarding community. In this duel, I will not use the arcane magic that will be taught in my class next term. Instead, it will be limited to the spells they learned previously at Hogwarts. This way, students who have reservations about my course can challenge me on equal terms." Turning, he gestured towards the venue's entrance, where a bustling crowd had gathered, eager to witness the duel. Gryffindor wizards formed the largest group, with Harry Potter and Ron Weasley leading the way. Harry and Ron exchanged smiles, their spirits buoyed by determination. They were well aware that the room of requirement offered everything from instruments to magic books. After countless sessions of rigorous training, they felt confident in their ability to defeat any opponent, provided those opponents didn't use the advanced magic that Ethan had taught, and relied solely on conventional spells. However, Ethan's next announcement sent shockwaves through the audience. He addressed the ongoing controversy surrounding the mysterious figure, a topic that had been hotly debated since the previous year. "I cannot definitively prove who is right or wrong, but I am committed to preparing students for any adverse situations that may arise. I refuse to mimic the former headmaster who, despite exaggerating the threat posed by Voldemort, did little to enhance the students' abilities." This was the second time Ethan had publicly expressed a non-committal stance on Voldemort's return since Dumbledore's departure. Dolores Umbridge, seizing upon Ethan's words, interpreted them as an acknowledgement of Voldemort's return. This revelation left her both infuriated and humiliated. The Ministry of Magic had been fervently denying this fact, and Ethan had previously seemed to support this stance. However, his attitude appeared to have shifted subtly after Dumbledore was ousted. Umbridge's frustration was momentarily alleviated when Ethan once again attributed the decline in students' practical combat skills to Dumbledore, a responsibility that, in reality, fell to the Ministry of Magic. This stance aligned with the desires of many within the ministry, as they believed that reducing students' combat abilities would make it easier to govern the wizarding world. "This will at least provide Fudge with a plausible excuse," Umbridge mused to herself. "I will never forget this night," she thought. planning to document the events in another chapter when the moment struck her. Chapter 597. Ethan, I will prove to you that we do not need to rely on your powerful magic, let alone the realm of black magic, to protect ourselves. While Umbridge was complaining, Harry also secretly made up his mind. He believed that not everyone possesses Ethan's talent and is suitable for learning powerful magic. Encouraging Neville and others to learn dark magic could lead them astray. Professor Dumbledore's persistence and opposition stem from his deep care and protection for the students. Harry's heart is filled with a sense of mission. He aims to fight not only for the rights and interests of himself and his friends, but also for justice and light in the entire wizarding world. The death of his parents at the hands of the Dark Lord's black magic has only strengthened his resolve to correct Ethan's misguided decisions and guide this former friend back onto the right path. At this time, most of those who stood up to challenge the members of the Bosho Society were members of the DA. Like Harry and Ron, they spent a considerable amount of time in the Room of Requirement, which was fully equipped with everything necessary. After Harry's extensive and meticulous training, they were fully prepared and faced the challenge with confidence. Ethan's public criticism of Dumbledore at the school, especially after they had just received Dumbledore's protection, left many feeling very dissatisfied. They saw Ethan's actions as an insult to Dumbledore during his time of trouble, which sparked feelings of anger and injustice. Now, they finally had the opportunity to openly fight and retaliate against Ethan, and they seized it without hesitation. This was not only for themselves, but also for Dumbledore, for justice, and for the future of the entire wizarding world. As the vice president of the DA, Ron stepped forward without hesitation and became the first challenger. His opponent was his old nemesis, Draco Malfoy. Ron was brimming with confidence, eager to use this opportunity to demonstrate his growth and strength. He also saw it as a chance to teach Draco a lesson and seek justice for past grievances. "Oh, look who it is," Draco Malfoy sneered, twirling his wand in his hand, his eyes flashing with excitement and contempt. "Ron Weasley, how dare you challenge me?" Draco had a long history of grievances with Harry and Ron, especially with Ron, whose embarrassing conflict in their third year was still fresh in his memory. Previously, due to Ethan's influence, he had been unable to act against Harry Potter and Ron Weasley. Now that Ron had approached him, Draco was not going to let this opportunity slip by. Ron, gripping his wand tightly, glared at Draco. "Malfoy, you don't need to use the word challenge to flatter yourself. It's a duel between us." Draco sneered and glanced at Ron disdainfully. "You're right, using the word challenge does flatter you. You red-haired paupers, the scum and disgrace of the pureblood family. Just wait, and I'll show you what true pureblood glory is." Hearing Draco's insulting words, Ron's nose twitched sharply, his cheeks flushed with anger, and his freckles became more pronounced. The hand holding his wand trembled slightly. Ethan stood to the side, not intervening in their provocation. Although this was not in keeping with the duel etiquette prevalent in the wizarding world, it was common to use words to anger the opponent before a duel as a tacitly approved tactic. Many young wizards gathered around to watch the duel, well aware of the feud between Ron Weasley and Draco Malfoy. The showdown between these old enemies undoubtedly sparked great interest among them. They whispered among themselves, speculating on the outcome of the duel. "For the sake of fairness, I have specially invited Professor Flitwick, a former duel champion and the dean of our Ravenclaw house, to referee this duel," Ethan announced, bringing an end to the trash-talking session between them. The atmosphere quieted down as Professor Flitwick made his appearance, greeted by warm cheers and applause from the stands. Professor Flitwick had always maintained a good relationship with Ethan, yet he was also a staunch supporter of Dumbledore. This made him a satisfactory choice as the referee for both parties involved. From the stands, Umbridge's eyes narrowed as she observed the camaraderie between Ethan and Flitwick, her dissatisfaction evident despite her clapping hands in a show of support. "Face your opponents." Professor Flitwick, serving as both witness and referee, commanded in his high-pitched voice, "Bow!" Draco Malfoy, with a curl of his lip and a glare at Ron, showed his reluctance. Despite his disdain, he bowed to Ron, adhering to the duel's formalities. Ron, taken aback by Draco's compliance, remembered a past duel where Draco and Harry had foregone this formality, opting instead for a tense standoff. Surprised by Draco's politeness, Ron quickly returned the gesture. "Raise your wand and get ready." Professor Flitwick's voice resonated across the field, his gaze fixed on the duelists to ensure fairness. "When I count to 3, begin the duel. 1, 2, 3. As Flitwick's count concluded, Draco and Ron raised their wands, determination etched on Ron's face as he eagerly cast Expelliarmus. The tip of Ron's wand emitted a dazzling red light. However, as the spell neared Draco, it was deflected by an invisible barrier, the result of Draco's silently cast iron armor curse. Draco had hoped to mimic Ethan's technique and redirect Ron's disarming curse back at him, but his attempt merely caused the spell to bounce off harmlessly. Undeterred, Ron launched a series of spells, including the Confinement Curse, Stunning Curse, and even the Split Curse, aiming to break through Draco's iron armor curse. Despite his efforts, Draco remained protected behind his invisible shield, looking on with a triumphant smirk. Ron, growing increasingly frustrated and exhausted from his relentless casting, felt humiliated, likening himself to a clown performing for an audience. In a fit of anger, Ron shouted, "Malfoy, you useless coward! Without your teammates to hide behind, you're nothing but a coward under that iron armor curse. If you're so capable, face me directly." Ron's words struck a nerve, referencing Draco's humiliating defeat at the hands of Hermione despite having a numerical advantage. This public exposure of his embarrassment enraged Draco. "How dare you?" he roared, abandoning any pretense of a fair duel. Gripping his wand tightly, Draco aimed at Ron's lower body and cast the Clear Fountain Curse. A stream of water, like a silver snake, shot towards Ron. Caught off guard by Draco's choice of a seemingly harmless spell in combat, Ron, benefiting from a half-year's training, nimbly dodged to the side, avoiding the curse. However, his shoes and trousers were soaked in the process, adding to the spectacle of their duel. Their clothes were still damp from the muddy water. Malfoy, undeterred by his missed attack, waved his wand again, this time targeting the ground behind Ron. He cast a transformation spell, and under his command, a clump of yellow mud quickly morphed into a fat, one-eyed toad. The grotesque creature let out a bizarre cry as it leaped towards Ron's crotch. The sight of the mud toad turned Ron's face deathly pale. This blind toad was a cruel reminder of what Ethan had transformed the fake Moody into last year as a form of revenge against Malfoy. The yellow mud's color, reminiscent of feces, and the toad's targeted leap only added to the humiliation Malfoy intended to convey. The realization of Malfoy's message triggered an overwhelming sense of nausea in Ron, rising from the depths of his heart to his throat. How could Malfoy stoop so low? Had he truly forgotten that he, too, had once been a victim, experiencing the same humiliation and anger? Ron's mouth opened involuntarily, and angry words began to spill out. "You." But in that moment, he recognized Malfoy's sinister intentions. Malfoy aimed to provoke him, to cloud his judgment and reveal his vulnerabilities. Ron struggled to remain silent, but it was too late. Lacking the skill of silent spellcasting, he found himself unable to cast spells while hurling insults. Thus, faced with the repulsive mud toad now inches away, Ron had no choice but to consider fleeing if he wished to avoid further disgrace. Instinctively, Ron prepared to dash away, eager to escape the vile creature. However, Draco's curse was relentless, leaving Ron trapped and without an escape route. Chapter 598, Draco's Cunning Victory. Draco Malfoy cleverly utilized the freezing curse to solidify the connection between Ron Weasley's souls and the ground, exploiting the wet surface created by the earlier Clear Spring curse. Just as Ron was about to sprint, he was caught off guard by the sudden immobilization. The force he applied was so excessive that his feet slipped out of his shoes, leaving his bare feet to skid across the ice, which was as smooth as glass. Although this fall ultimately released Ron from the icy grip, it also caused him to lose his balance on the slippery surface completely. After sliding uncontrollably for a short distance, he crashed heavily onto the ground. A yellow mud toad, seemingly mocking his plight, hopped closer to Ron. As Ron opened his mouth to retaliate, Draco's second curse struck with unexpected speed and intensity. "Incisor match stick!" Draco sneered, casting the spell. Ron's attempt to cast a counterspell failed miserably, resulting in nothing more than a few futile puffs of air. His front teeth began to grow at an alarming rate, transforming into two enormous protrusions extending beyond his lips. Draco's last spell, combined with the yellow mud toad's presence, seemed flawlessly coordinated, as if rehearsed countless times. The transformation grotesquely distorted Ron's freckled face, rendering him unable to close his mouth or utter a spell in defense. Still grounded, Ron could only watch as the toad opened its wide mouth, ejecting a stream of yellow mud that splattered across his face and oversized teeth, coating them in a repulsive layer of muck. Adding to Ron's frustration and despair, Draco chose this moment to reverse the incisor matchstick spell, causing Ron's teeth to rapidly shrink back to normal size, dragging the filth with them into his mouth. This horrifying turn of events plunged Ron into a nightmare scenario. Desperately, he reached for his wand, attempting to reverse the toad's transformation spell and cleanse the vile substance. However, his overwhelming urge to retch disrupted his concentration, making it impossible to cast any spell effectively. Professor Flitwick promptly declared the duel over, awarding Draco his first victory. He then approached Ron, attempting to clean the revolting yellow filth from his body. Despite these efforts, the damage to Ron's reputation was done. The live broadcast had already shown his demeaning state to the audience. On the big screen, Ron's figure, covered in filth, was a pitiful sight. While Draco's ardent supporters, like Pansy Parkinson, managed to cheer and applaud, most spectators were visibly disgusted, their faces contorted in an attempt to suppress their revulsion. Some of the more sensitive audience members couldn't stomach the graphic display and had already succumbed to nausea. Meanwhile, Ron, now half kneeling and coughing violently, tried desperately to clear the mud and vomit from his mouth to prevent choking. His face was ashen, his eyes burning with humiliation and rage. Draco approached the defeated Ron with a smug grin, mockingly imitating Ron's Scottish accent, a distinctive trait of the red-haired Weasleys, and taunted, "Shit, Weasley!" This somewhat absurd duel between Draco Malfoy and Ron Weasley concluded in a manner no one had anticipated. Following this, Seamus Finnegan and Parvati Patil stepped into the arena, their spirits high. However, their enthusiasm was quickly crushed by the skilled young wizards of the Erudite Society. Seamus fared even worse than Ron, succumbing almost instantly to Draco's spell, while Parvati was overshadowed by her sister Padma's superior spellcasting. The outcome of the duel was expected, as not only Draco Malfoy and Padma Patil, but also other exchange students from the Erudite Society demonstrated exceptional prowess. For instance, Ethan's roommate, Steve Cornford, had acquired many excellent combat skills from him. When Harry Potter, the former leader of the DA, faced Steve, he was unable to showcase his abilities that had earned him third place in the previous year's Triwizard Tournament. Right at the start, Harry was swiftly disarmed and then mercilessly struck by a stunning curse, leaving him unconscious on the ground. The Gryffindor's spirits were visibly dampened by this turn of events. In a generous move, Ethan proposed a team battle to offer them a second chance. Each side would send several young wizards, and the duel rules were to be disregarded. This allowed the young wizards to fully utilize their skills in a game free from the constraints of traditional etiquette. Ethan showcased his mastery in transformation spells by converting the long dueling stage into a square arena. He created numerous bunkers and obstacles on the field, injecting strategy and excitement into the game. This piqued the interest of many young wizards who had initially been hesitant to participate, and they eagerly joined the fray. Despite the Erudite Society fielding only 5 young wizards against more than a dozen challengers, Ethan welcomed all the challengers into the arena without concern. In the ensuing battle between the few and the many, the young wizards of the Erudite Society displayed remarkable strength and seamless teamwork. They skillfully utilized the bunkers and obstacles to dodge attacks while launching effective counterstrikes. Ultimately, the Erudite Society emerged victorious, defeating all the challengers and achieving a flawless record. This victory was not merely a testament to the magical prowess of the Erudite Society's young wizards or the sophistication of the spells they mastered. It was a clear indication of the benefits of their combat training, which was based on a simplified version of the new Auror training methods. This training had honed their skills in using cover, coordinating spellcasting with clear roles and objectives, and working together seamlessly. In contrast, the young wizards led by the DA were at a disadvantage. Despite their numbers and diligent practice in spellcasting and one-on-one duels throughout the semester, they struggled with teamwork. This disparity made the team battle even more one-sided than the individual duels, casting a pall over the Hogwarts stands. Even the Ravenclaws and young witches who had staunchly supported Ethan, drawn by his leadership in Ravenclaw or his charisma, were silenced by the evident gap between the two sides. This realization underscored the importance of introducing arcane magic classes. The young wizards in the stands found themselves contemplating the necessity of participating in the arcane magic class when it officially starts next semester. The previous skeptics in the stands, who may have had reservations about teaching powerful magic, could no longer justify their objections when faced with the undeniable advantage of Ethan's approach to teaching combat skills. The harsh reality laid bare the need for practical combat training in the wizarding world. The education at Hogwarts, regardless of the reasons or who is to blame, indeed has its flaws. It was late at night, following the eagerly awaited game at Hogwarts. Hidden in the shadow of a Muggle post office, a narrow alley lay shrouded in darkness. The moonlight, obstructed by thick clouds, failed to penetrate the alley, giving it an especially sinister atmosphere. Suddenly, several figures clad in black robes materialized in this secluded spot, silent as the night itself. These were Death Eaters, their presence invariably heralding a sense of doom. At that moment, a brown-haired man, visibly inebriated and clutching an empty wine bottle, stumbled towards them from a distance. His curiosity, fueled by alcohol, drew him closer to the Death Eaters. However, before he could utter a word, a green light, swift as lightning, shot out from the darkness and struck him. The man's body tensed for a brief moment before he collapsed to the ground, lifeless. "Dirty Muggle drunk," Bellatrix Lestrange remarked with disdain, glancing at the man now lying dead. She licked the corners of her lips as if savoring the memory of the kill. "Well done, honey," Rudolphus said, attempting to mimic her action with a sycophantic smile, but his lips met only air. Bellatrix, unimpressed by Rudolphus's attempt at flattery, responded not with words but with a swift motion of her wand, which transformed into a whip and lashed out at him. Rudolphus, still smiling, dodged the whip with agility. This perilous exchange seemed to be a twisted form of affection in their marriage, a bizarre understanding between them. Ignoring her husband, Bellatrix proceeded to the courtyard door at the alley's end, with the other Death Eaters trailing behind her. Once they were alone, they began to murmur curses, targeting the house. After a brief period of incantation, Bellatrix successfully cast a spell that unlocked the door, allowing them entry. Chapter 599. At that moment, in the room, Broderick Bode, the reticent man from the Department of Mysteries, was deep in sleep. His complexion was pallid, his brows knitted together, casting a shadow of gloom even in his slumber. It was only yesterday that he had been discharged from the hospital ahead of schedule, thanks to a novel treatment introduced by St. Mungo's Hospital from the Offa United Company. Yet, confusion still clouded his mind regarding his impulsive visit to the prophecy hall and his attempt to touch the prophecy orbs. That rash decision had ensnared him in the spell safeguarding the prophecy orb, leading him to believe for an extended period that he had been transformed into a teapot. Suddenly, the tranquility of the night was shattered by a magic alarm, triggered by the opening of the courtyard door through a spell. Broderick was jolted awake by the abrupt noise. He sat up swiftly, his heart pounding. Rushing to the window, he rubbed his bleary eyes, straining to adjust to the dim light. Peering out, he discerned several dark figures infiltrating the yard. Narrowing his eyes, he attempted to etch their silhouettes into his memory. As his vision cleared, a wave of dread washed over him, sending a shiver down his spine. The faces emerging from the darkness were those he had hoped never to encounter again, Bellatrix Lestrange and the Death Eaters. Fear rendered his legs weak, barely able to support his body. He knew he needed to flee immediately, or face dire consequences. Broderick's first instinct was to attempt apparition, but it was futile. "They've set up an anti-apparition ward," he exclaimed, realization dawning on him. This explained the Death Eater's delayed entry. Trapped, with no means of escape, Broderick frantically searched for a hiding place, but it was already too late. The door was violently kicked open, revealing a tall figure. Instinctively, Broderick raised his wand to cast a spell, but his opponent was quicker. A spell flashed, disarming him, while a long black whip like a serpent ensnared him tightly. Broderick's eyes widened in terror as the figure approached. It was Rudolph Lestrange, his face twisted into a sinister smile, his eyes alight with madness. Without a word, Rudolph raised his wand and unleashed the fire curse. Crackling sounds filled the room as dazzling orange flames engulfed everything. Broderick struggled against the whip's unyielding grip, the heat searing his face as the flames drew nearer. As death's breath caressed his face, he ceased his struggles, resigning himself to his fate. The flames danced and roared, consuming his cabinets and wallpaper. The familiar objects of his life were reduced to ashes, leaving Broderick with a profound sense of sorrow and despair. He knew his end was near. Why? Broderick's voice was a trembling whisper, seeking an answer from the departing Death Eaters. The only response was Bellatrix Lestrange's maniacal laughter, sharp and piercing, reminiscent of an owl's cry in the night. Rudolph Lestrange turned to Lucius Malfoy, mocking, "Look at this poor fellow, Lucius. He didn't even realize you had cast the soul-stealing curse on him." Rudolph's looking wary, couldn't help but shake his head. "You are too timid, being so cautious about a guy who is so easy to control." Broderick, upon hearing these words, felt a chill in his heart. He finally understood the truth of the matter, but what good was it now? He had no choice but to watch the Death Eaters leave the room one by one, leaving him to face the impending disaster alone. Soon, he saw one of the Death Eaters wave his wand, and the corridor leading to the door was instantly engulfed in flames. The flames leaped from one shelf to another, like greedy beasts in a frenzy. Even the mirror caught fire, and Broderick saw his own reflection become blurred against the backdrop of countless dancing flames. The fire spread rapidly, and thick smoke billowed, leaving Broderick choking. He felt the fire snakes writhing at his feet, and he couldn't help but let out a shrill wail from the boo, earning pain. Eventually, his wailing was quickly drowned out by the roar of the flames until silence prevailed. Bellatrix Lestrange and the others watched the fire with indifference from outside the house, confirming Broderick's demise. Rudolph's, seemingly unsatisfied, turned his wand with a grin and aimed it at the Muggle house next door. He frantically cast spells to set fires everywhere, roaring, "Burn them to death! Let these dirty Muggles pay for their ignorance!" The flames danced wildly into the night, transforming the once peaceful alley into a veritable purgatory, while the Death Eaters stood at a distance, admiring their masterpiece with twisted, satisfied smiles. "Rudolph's, stop. The higher-ups don't allow you to use the fire curse because they don't want to escalate the situation. This doesn't mean you can cast the burning curse at will." Lucius Malfoy was horrified when he saw this and tried to grab Rudolph's arm while he was casting the spell. However, Bellatrix quickly stopped Lucius. "Lucius, why are you so nervous about a bunch of Muggles? You coward, trust me, you'll be fine. Fudge might even claim in the newspaper that it was these Muggles who caused the fire that killed Balder. Let Rudolph's continue to burn." Meanwhile, in Hogwarts Castle, Harry Potter was walking with heavy steps, slowly descending the stairs leading to Snape's dungeon. Frustration was evident on his face. Based on his previous experiences of attending class, Harry knew that if he faced Professor Snape in this state, his thoughts would be transparent to him. However, he couldn't shake off the thoughts that troubled him. The members of the DA Erudite Society he had trained were completely defeated, and he, as everyone's hope, was easily defeated by Steve, feeling like a clown. Just as Harry was lost in self-blame and despair, the door of the underground classroom slowly opened, revealing Professor Snape's frosty face. "You're late again, Potter." Snape's voice was as cold as the wind, making Harry shiver. Before Harry could explain, Snape had already waved his wand and cast Legilimency. An invisible contest unfolded between them, and Harry's thoughts were exposed layer by layer under Snape's prying eyes. Snape, with a sarcastic smile, stared at Harry, who was slumped in the chair, breathing heavily. "Look, what do I see? Our savior is actually trying to correct the misconceptions of his good friend Ethan Green and also wants to protect his classmates from the temptation of black magic? How ridiculous. You think you can change their decision just because you can't even remember the process of mixing a vitality tonic? You're overestimating your capabilities. Snape's voice was drawn out, and every word was like a sharp blade, piercing Harry's heart. Harry pursed his lips tightly, stared at Snape, and retorted loudly, "That's my privacy." "Not to me." Snape's voice was cold and ruthless. "If you don't work harder, it won't be the same for the mysterious man." Snape's voice suddenly sharpened, cutting through the air as he advanced towards Harry. He placed his hands on the armrests of Harry's chair, leaned in close, and peered into Harry's eyes with an intensity that felt as though he was trying to peer into his soul. "If he decides to invade your mind, you won't last 2 seconds, Potter." Overwhelmed by Snape's imposing presence, Harry remained silent. Seeing no response, Snape straightened up, a flicker of contempt crossing his face. "You're just like your father, lazy and conceited. You think you're above everything because you're the savior. You have no right to insult my father." Harry's temper flared, and he stood up abruptly, locking eyes with Snape. "Weak," Snape uttered coldly. "I am not weak." Harry shot back with vehemence. "Then prove it, Potter." Snape's voice was low but filled with a commanding power. "Control your emotions. Guard your heart. The Dark Lord will not spare you simply because you're weary." With those words, Snape employed legilimency once more, aiming his wand at Harry. An invisible force stealth highly breached Harry's defenses, attempting to infiltrate his mind. This time, however, Harry was not as vulnerable. He mustered all his strength to resist, to shield his innermost thoughts from Snape's prying eyes. Despite his efforts, Snape managed to glimpse fragments of Harry's memories, the warm embrace between Harry and Sirius, the mutual affection and trust they shared. These moments elicited a mocking sneer from Snape. Truly revolting. Chapter 600. Harry was stung by Snape's words. He walked around Snape angrily and made his way to the other side of the classroom. "I'm tired. I need to rest." "The Dark Lord has no time to rest," Snape frowned, his gaze following Harry's retreating back. He spoke with dissatisfaction. "You and the Dark Lord, your consciousnesses are connected. What else do, you disappointing sentimental brat, except complain about how life is unfair? You may not have noticed, but life is inherently unfair. Of course, your father is completely different from you in this regard. He actually often causes injustice." "My father is a great man." Harry's voice echoed in the empty classroom, trembling with anger. "Your father is a pig." Snape's face instantly darkened. He grabbed Harry's shoulders and threw him back into the chair. The tip of his wand flashed with cold light and was pointed at Harry. Just as he was about to cast Legilimens, Harry used the same spell on him with lightning speed. Perhaps it was the mention of James Potter that ignited the anger deep in Snape's heart, or perhaps it was the constant treatment of Harry as incompetent that made him relax his vigilance. At that moment, Snape failed to cast occlumency in time and was hit by Harry's Legilimens. A flood of memories surged into Harry's mind. They were of Snape's days at Hogwarts when he was young, being mercilessly bullied by James Potter and others, left to fend for himself. Harry's heart was filled with an inexplicable anger and sadness as he finally understood the deep-seated hatred between his father, James Potter, and Snape. Harry was initially confused by the animosity, unable to comprehend why his father would treat Snape with such cruelty. However, as the memories continued to unfold, Harry was surprised to discover the relationship between his mother, Lily Evans, and Snape was far from merely being extraordinary friends. In his memory, Harry saw his mother, Lily, always standing up to defend Snape without hesitation, even drawing her wand against his father to stop Snape's bullying. This revelation shocked Harry. He had never imagined such a deep emotional bond between his mother and Snape, until one time, in a moment of anger, Snape called her Mudblood. Harry saw the expression on his father, James Potter's face, and found it strikingly familiar. It was almost exactly the same as the annoying expression he remembered from Draco Malfoy. Harry witnessed his father hanging Snape upside down in the air, letting him struggle helplessly, then frivolously showing off his prank to his companions and asking them casually, "Who wants to see me take off Snivellus' underwear?" James' behavior earned a burst of applause from the surrounding Gryffindor wizards and witches, as if it was a wonderful performance. Public humiliation like this usually leads to one of two completely opposite outcomes. Either the victim is ostracized in social circles and can no longer find a partner, or they become unexpectedly popular and never lack for companionship. Professor Snape, clearly lacking the foundation for the latter, experienced the former. His lonely, single life was a testament to the profound impact that embarrassing incident had on him. Witnessing all this, Harry found it hard to accept. He had always believed he was a good person, despite not excelling academically, occasionally copying homework, not studying too hard, and even having a particularly bad temper in the past year. He was convinced he would never engage in such outrageous behavior. Even the Weasley twins, famous for their pranks, would not stoop to such a humiliating prank on a classmate. In full view of the public, the target of the prank was the always annoying Malfoy. Harry, however, felt that no one deserved such treatment. He believed it was entirely his father's fault that Snape had suffered such an ordeal. Harry had always held his parents in high regard, so when Snape described James Potter with words like arrogance and arrogant, Harry dismissed it as malicious slander. However, witnessing James's actions towards Snape firsthand forced Harry to admit that Snape's descriptions were not only accurate, but also quite understated. What Harry found even harder to accept was seeing his mother, Lily, defending Snape and attempting to stop James's reprehensible behavior. Following her intervention, James persisted in pursuing Lily, who not only decisively rejected him, but also expressed her disgust. Harry was baffled by this. He couldn't comprehend how his parents ended up together, and even began to question the nature of their relationship, wondering if James had coerced Lily or used a love potion on her. Thankfully, Harry never saw the letters Professor Snape wrote to Lily. Otherwise, he might have started questioning his own parentage and even whether he was Snape's son, but that was a truth he would never uncover. In that moment, a powerful force gripped his neck tightly, as if clamped by a pair of pliers, leaving him gasping for air. Harry was abruptly pulled from Snape's memory and thrust back into reality. He saw Snape, pale with rage and eyes ablaze, who then grabbed Harry by the neck, pulled him close, and said in a trembling voice, "Your lessons are over forever. Get out, Potter." Harry tried to explain, but Snape suddenly released his grip and pushed him away. Harry stumbled back, hitting the wall, his heart pounding as if it would burst from his chest. He knew their already strained relationship had now irreparably broken down. In a daze, Harry returned to his dormitory, his mind still reeling from the memories until an early morning newspaper delivery by an owl snapped him out of it. He grabbed the newspaper, hoping to distract himself from the lingering images, but the contents only plunged him into deeper confusion. The front page of the Daily Prophet featured a young Dumbledore and his handsome companion, both laughing heartily, exuding youth and carefreeness. The headline read, "Dumbledore's Life and Lies." The article, penned by Rita Skeeter, revealed shocking details about Dumbledore's past, including his friendship with Gellert Grindelwald, the European Dark Lord defeated by Dumbledore. Harry's heart sank. Dumbledore and Grindelwald were friends? He eagerly read the article, which cited Bathilda Bagshot, a renowned magical historian. It unveiled Dumbledore's dark past, including imprisoning his sister for being a squib and his close relationship with Grindelwald. It even suggested that Dumbledore had once dreamed of overturning the Statute of Secrecy to establish wizard rule over Muggles alongside Grindelwald, neglecting his mourning family in the process. Harry was deeply engrossed in planning how to navigate the power struggles ahead. An article he read suggested that Dumbledore's biological sister, Ariana, might have been the first victim sacrificed for the greater good. Harry shook his head vigorously, trying to dispel the disturbing thoughts. He had always seen Dumbledore as a paragon of virtue and wisdom, but now everything seemed to crumble. Harry wanted to believe that the allegations were merely fabrications by Rita Skeeter, but the autographed letter and photos from Dumbledore that accompanied the newspaper article forced him to confront a harsh reality. A shadow seemed to engulf Harry's heart. This year had been a relentless series of calamities for him. It began with Voldemort's horrifying resurrection during the Goblet of Fire, an event most chose to disbelieve, despite Harry witnessing it firsthand. Then, Dumbledore had to leave Hogwarts, a place he dearly loved, to take responsibility for events he wasn't to blame for. The situation was further complicated by the involvement of his good friend Ethan, along with Fudge and Umbridge. Harry's attempts to steer Ethan away from teaching dangerous magic had been futile. Moreover, his inability to hold his own in a duel added to his frustration. Harry's disillusionment deepened after seeing Snape's memories, which confirmed that his father was indeed as arrogant as Snape had always claimed. Now Harry's faith in Dumbledore began to waver. He had always believed Dumbledore to be noble and just, but the revelations in the newspaper exposed Dumbledore's darker side. Dumbledore had once dabbled in dark magic and had significant achievements in that realm. The articles highlighted his indifferent attitude towards his squib sister and his close relationship with the European Dark Lord, Grindelwald. Even when Grindelwald was at the height of his power, he never caused trouble in the UK. All these revelations were shattering Harry's worldview.